actors say they high, say they sip of pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up, had to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in the field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Took the way you saw the world, then distorted it. Now you think you wanna rock that twirl somewhere orbiting. Theories disproportionate, the truth distorted quick with a forceful grip. They force a misinfo that we absorbing quick. Took the people's signature that mean extorted it. They forging it. If news ain't cause informants who informing them. There's a surplus, but they tell us there are shortages. Credit economy mortgages, dollar that's supported with empty fortresses. But what's important is this: we porting ships, important gifts. Of course it is, but extortion is in accordance with an assortment list of foreign tricks. We ignoring which informant this, informant this. It looked like we were snoring tricked. Pedophilia and the government endorsing it. Yeah, eugenics is exactly what abortion is. You just vilify those insubordinate. Way to matrix engineer, that's unfortunate. Geopolitically we in a field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers, actors say they high, say they sip with pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up just to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in a field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real?
In a world, in a world where people think there's nothing outside of the material world. What up, fam? Guys, let me know if the audio and the video's looking good, and we will get started shortly. Sound and video good? Cool. As you guys can see, we got a new setup. I don't have everything set up though. I actually have this mic, but it is not the mic I'm using because I haven't gotten it to work yet. And we're on StreamYard, as you can tell, which will be streaming from OBS, but I haven't got that set up either. Nas, Æther, Jay-Z, that's true. The blue graphic looked like the stem cell from IMCEL clinic in Ukraine. Flat Gang, glad to see you back. Thank you guys for super chat. Shout out to my boy Awesome. Thank you for the super chat, brother. I'll read off all the super chats. Unless they're during the presentation, it'll be afterwards, and then I'll read the donations. And I may read the super chats during the presentation. We're going to see how it goes. Professor Excuses Dave, don't have the stones to debate. Nice shirt, homie. Yeah, thank you, man. Shouts out to my boy Awesome, shooting me the merch. This shirt is fresh. All right. So the stream is titled Æther, and it is about the ether. We've taken a break for a while, and so I'm launching the channel back up. Shout out to all the people that donated to help me get a PC, which is what we're doing the stream on, and it's awesome. Shout out to my boy Bob for building it, and shout out to all the people that rallied to get it funded. That's awesome, and you guys are awesome, and the computer is awesome. So we should have a lot of cool content coming. I have a bunch of different shows I'm going to be doing, different types of shows. So instead of just doing streams, they're going to be like shows based on the day of the week and a certain time, and we'll have a schedule. We'll get that all out for everybody. It should be cool. Lots of cool stuff coming. and you guys will enjoy. All right, so let's just get into the subject at hand here, the ether. I'm sure a lot of you guys know, or you may have been keeping up. There's been this resurgence of, people hating on the ether, and even this like war waged on the ether. I don't want to get too messy. Honestly, I just think it's super low vibration and lame. But yeah, I jumped on FED and people started freaking out when they asked me what I thought about the ether, and this has sparked this entire debate. And so we're gonna get into all the details. The ether is a huge discussion, and there's no way I could cover it all right here. And I actually ended up taking a lot of stuff out of here just because of how much is in it. So bear with me. It does get technical, but I think this is important. This is not the stuff that we're going to teach you, or at least it won't be presented in the coherent way that I'm going to do it. And there's that. I will say this. Usually when someone cannot debate you or your actual position, they do a handful of things. One of them is to straw man your position. One of them is to not allow you to speak, or to funding mute you, as we call it. Red herring fallacies and ad hominem fallacies. These are the primary ones, and anyone that's discussed the earth with anybody that believes it's a globe probably has encountered these, and this is because they don't want you making your full coherent point. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to actually make the full coherent points uninterrupted, and should be cool. So thank you guys for kicking it. We got 100 people in here. We'll just go ahead and get started. Audio is slightly messed up. Well, I don't actually know what I could possibly, maybe it's turned up too loud and it's clipping. So maybe that's better, and maybe you guys can turn me up. I did have it turned up really loud, so maybe that's what's going on. Oh, the slight echo from the room. Yeah, nothing I can do about that right now. Do you ever consider a modeling career? No. I do know that when we have this mic working, it's going to be a lot better, right? So we have this other mic all the way over here. All right, anyway, let's get into the presentation. And should be cool. All right, so I'll go ahead and go play from the beginning. Stream. I think I'm going to do it like this. You guys won't be able to see some of the stuff in the lower corner, but it'll be okay. All right, let's get into it. All right, the ether. Dun, dun, dun. Back. And shout out to all the legends on Rockfin. I see I just got a $20 tip on Rockfin. Thank you very much, brother. It's greatly appreciated. And I will read all the tips off at the end of this stream. Thank you for the $10 super sticker. Much love. Surviving apocalypse. All right. What is the ether? This is the number one thing that people have been saying, as if this right here alone refutes the entire discussion. And they say it with this derogatory tone. What is the ether? With all this arrogance and confidence, like the idea being that if you ask 20 people what the ether is, you'll get 20 different answers. And how can I argue if it's real or not? You don't even know what it is. All right, so let's figure out what it is. The ether is a proposed logical foundation of interpretation. It is a philosophical framework. Now, a lot of people may not fully grasp this, and it's a framework to explain a lot of physical phenomena. So people maybe don't fully realize that it's a framework of interpretation. So it is logic. It is a logical framework. So by definition, it is philosophy, as if to take us down our etymological or our epistemological path. Okay. Ether is postulated to be an energetic metaphysical background that acts as a medium or substrate for electromagnetic phenomena. More specifically, it is pure potential that acts as the essence of all field modalities, Put another way, it is what comprises all fields. One of the critiques is the use of the word medium here, and then people want to invoke the definition of medium being defined as some type of substance or material. And seeing as how we're talking about something immaterial, it can't be called a medium, and that a non-manifest medium or immaterial medium is an oxymoron. Of course, ironically, that position is moronic, frankly, because if you invoke a materialist definition, meaning that they define the world to be confined to materialism and there's nothing outside the material world, and then you say, okay, well, that's what the word means, then we can't actually talk about anything metaphysical effectively. Terrible argument, semantical argument, literally non sequitur to the actual substance. It acts as a medium. It is what sustains or carries electromagnetic energy. Ether is proposed as non-Cartesian counterspatial inertia, and not necessarily the way some people try to define inertia in the modern time. Thus, the ether is absolute and is not amenable to ordinary measurement. Non-Cartesian, so when you say, where is the ether? Is it there? Is it here? Is it X, Y, Z on a coordinate system? It's non-Cartesian. To help you wrap your mind around this, some people may think it's like there's a room here, there's a wall, and then there's another room over here, and that's what they're claiming the ether is. It is not like that. It is effectively laid over the material world. It's dimensional. And of course, for example, you cannot see all things that exist. There is an intertwined metaphysical interaction between the metaphysical and the physical world. So it is not amenable to ordinary measurement, right? Because of this. And it's also absolute. Okay, so to understand the inertia being, it's an absolute, again, you can be semantical with everything when we say frame of reference, because if you confine all your definitions to materialism, it's stupid. Okay, ether acts as the medium in which the phenomena of light, electrical actions at a distance, and propagation takes place. Okay, so this was, of course, the fundamental framework for electrical field theory up until the point that it was done away with for heliocentric purposes. And it's, really electrical field theory hasn't really progressed since then in major ways, certainly not fundamental understanding. But anyway, there you go. There's a general idea what it is. When people ask what it is an energetic metaphysical background that acts as a medium or substrate that sustains electromagnetic phenomena. The ether is immaterial, thus intrinsically cannot be scienced, nor is it quantifiable. That's pretty simple there. I know I'm kind of blocking it out. I'm sorry. Maybe halfway through if we take a break, because there's a lot in here. I may drop the link so you can guys follow along, but I will drop the link to this presentation afterwards. Okay, so the ether's immaterial. So if you try to critique it because it doesn't adhere to material parameters, that's ignorant. Okay, defining of the terms as applied. Now, I could do a whole presentation just defining some of the terms that are going to come up and that we just used in that first slide, but I am just doing this presentation to address a lot of the bigger parts. Okay, so metaphysical, transcending physical matter, beyond the physical material world, right? Which we know exists, of course. Background, the area or scenery behind the main object of contemplation, and as applied, that is the material world, especially perceived as a framework for it. Medium, the background frame that makes possible the transfer of energy from one location to another, especially through waves, although waves are not things or what something is, rather what something does. Substrate, an underlying substance or layer. Oh man, you said the word substance, but you said it's immaterial. That's an oxymoron. We're using words confined to materialistic definitions, so please try to jump up above the sub 100 IQ round, and then we can have a discussion. Counter space, non-dimensional etheric realm. Okay, it's not dimensional as we are perceived. Again, it is not Cartesian. It is the etheric realm. It is counter space, so what we would call space, as in the idea of volume and/or area around us, specifically volume, as area is two-dimensional. Pure potential is unmanifest energy or homeostasis in counter space. Okay, so the etheric realm is pure potential that is unmanifest. And then we have naturally occurring observable phenomena that derives from this according to this framework. Okay, now let's get into the critique that we've been hearing. And a lot of people think they really just got the ether wrapped up and they can crush it with their little argument here. So the ether falls outside the scope of the scientific verification and validation, thus cannot be proven. This is the critique that people have been giving towards ether, and I can, of course, do the critique better than most of them. Natural science is the study of the natural world, thus claims pertaining to the natural world should adhere to the parameters of natural science by way of the scientific method and scientific experimentation. There are three constituent parts of a scientific experiment: dependent, independent, and control variables. First, you must observe a naturally occurring phenomena, that is your dependent variable. Secondly, propose a cause and effect relationship test, that's your hypothesis. And lastly, you manipulate the presumed cause, or your independent variable, to validate it is in fact the cause of the observed effect. The ether is postulated to be immaterial, therefore intrinsically cannot meet these requirements. Okay, so basically people say, what is the ether? Can you prove it? Can you see it? Can you give me a jar of the ether? You can't scientifically prove it. It doesn't exist. So now you're making claims of it not existing. And of course, falsification is independent of replacement. But again, this is a philosophical, logical framework. And people are basically critiquing it as if what their position is science. And whoever talks about the ether is pseudoscience. Now, of course, pseudoscience is something that masquerades falsely to be science. Well, if someone's telling you that the ether is immaterial, it cannot be science. It's a philosophical, logical framework. That is not pseudoscience. It isn't claiming to be science. It's immaterial. Okay? And not everything can be science, but we can still know them to be true using logic. Just like the second law of thermodynamics. Necessary antecedent, the gas pressure is physical containment because entropy will increase. That is not science. That is an observation in the natural world that we have described. For example, what is the independent variable of entropy? So if you apply your own rigid dogmatic script that nothing can be discussed outside of science, you can't talk about entropy. Okay? And people will try to say false equivalence fallacy. No one's equivocating anything. You can discuss things and invoke them and know them without it being scientifically validated within the rigid dogmatic material scientific method, because some things fall outside of that scope. Right. So that is the critique. And so people say, what's the independent variable? Can you prove it? Oh, non-manifest. We'll get into it. So here's the big part that none of these people that have been running around bashing the ether want to have addressed. And it is hilarious, and it is objective, okay? We have two fundamental frameworks, and that is atomism or the ether. So when you say you know the ether does not exist, you are claiming atomism by default. There's only two fundamental frameworks that have ever been proposed to interpret phenomena within the natural world. That is atomism and the ether, okay? So that's your two choices. Now, if you want to claim it's a false dichotomy, come up with a new one. But we all know the people critiquing the ether are not coming up with a new one, and we're going to get into it very specific. And the truth is, most people don't actually understand the ramifications or implications of this conversation, and hence why I am doing a presentation on it. Okay, prior to any attempt to understand the natural world, one must first determine a foundational framework of interpretation. You can do science all day, but you can't do anything with the information if you don't have logic, a logical framework to interpret the world. Okay, this is the first step. We have to have a logical framework in which we're going to go into the natural world to try to understand the natural world. You have to. Or you can just run around and do nothing, but it's a futile pursuit, destined to oblivion. And again, ironically, these are the two choices that we have. Okay, we have atomism and we have the ether. Okay? This inevitably confines us to a philosophical determination at the onset of our pursuit to understand the natural world. Inevitably, this is a philosophical determination that is a prerequisite to us going into observable phenomena. Okay? So when you say, why you're not allowed to talk about the ether, which is, of course, that is the primary motive for this whole thing. Is it's not just that people disagree or agree to disagree. There are now people, which I must have missed, where we voted cult leaders in flat Earth that are now going around telling us what we are or what we are not allowed to talk about. That's funny. So now we're going to have to intellectually eviscerate that side of the argument and knock them down a notch. And that's just me being frank here. Quantification is not science, rather is merely a description. Math describes, science explains. In order to explain phenomena, we must first apply a framework of interpretation. I have the word must underlined because it's objective. This is not debatable. You have to have a framework of interpretation to explain the world. Okay? Two options sit before us. Once again, is atomism or is ether? And we are going to dive into it and see which one is actually more viable. All right. You can, of course, see the irony here that when you say that's not science, you can't prove it. What's the independent variable? Whoop. Ether's not real. What you're doing, you're an idiot. You're a moron. All this other stuff. It's non-manifest. It isn't real. You can't see it, so it's not real, right? What you're not realizing is that you're making a claim by claiming that ether isn't a framework that can be interpreted or used to interpret. You're claiming atomism, and therefore you're claiming a philosophical framework yourself. And of course, atomism, the philosophy of atomism, cannot be science. They don't have an independent variable. It's not manifest. We're going to get into this in detail. So atomism, a theoretical approach that regards something as interpretable through analysis into distinct, separable, and independent elementary components. A doctrine that the physical or physical and mental universe is composed of simple, indivisible, minute particles. Atomism is, by definition, philosophy. The debate's already over. All the critique that you're not allowed to talk about the ether because it isn't science, that entire talking point has already been refuted. We're like 4 slides in. It doesn't matter what anyone says, but it's just subjective. Atomism is birthed from the perceived necessity to quantify all things. Thus, the need for quantification dictates an atomistic application. Simply put, everything must be a particle or it cannot be counted. Okay? It's pretty simple. Atomism is proposed as a philosophical framework to interpret the natural world. Thus, the same critique previously covered can be equally applied. Right? Atomism is a philosophy. Therefore, the critique of the scientific method and, to make definitive claims about the natural world requires, utilizing the scientific method and the parameters within natural science, which is the study of the natural world, and that is scientific experimentation, where you have a naturally occurring observable phenomenon. I can do the scripts too, guys, believe it or not. It's not impressive. It's actually very monotonous and redundant. Okay, further, atomism is a philosophy confined to a materialistic need for quantification. That is what this is all about, okay? And so we've created a theoretical model to quantify things. By materialism, a theory that physical matter is the only or fundamental reality and that all being, processes, and phenomena can be explained as manifestations or results of matter. So when you say it's non-manifest means it doesn't exist. It is by definition materialism. That is the definition of materialism, literally. Again, materialism, a theory that physical matter is the only or fundamental reality and that all being, processes, and phenomena can be explained as manifestations or results of matter. Meaning, yes, that's including if you think little physical particles that aren't matter but they're energy, you're saying it's derived from the material world alone, is by definition materialism, which, by the way, is the entire deception. The whole deception of where you live was to make you think that materialism was somehow viable and everything came from nothing, even though there's a pre-existing energy, which isn't material. That's not materialism. And then lightning struck primordial soup and rocks turned into fish that turned into, rats and then apes, and then you came from that. Everything has a materialistic explanation. Everything is within the materially manifest world, and nothing is outside of that. That was a deception. That was a deception. The Gnostic esoteric belief systems of the people that actually propagated these deceptions to you, they 100% do not adhere to materialism. In fact, they won't even let you in the club if you're an atheist. All right. Implication of this claim. If something is not physically manifest within the material world, then it does not exist. Does that sound familiar? Has anyone heard anyone saying that lately? Has anyone ever heard anyone say this? If something is not physically manifest within the material world, then it does not exist. This framework is logically bankrupt on its face. For obvious reasons, examples to the contrary: intuition, memory, dreams, consciousness, and of course, the Creator, to name a few. Due to the inevitability of the metaphysical alone, this philosophy holds no logical viability whatsoever. The debate is now over again. The debate has now been won again. Materialism is not viable on its face. It's just objectively not. And we can know things outside of a materialistic application, such as, again, we have dreams and intuition and consciousness and memories, and the necessary antecedent to creation is a creator who did not scientifically manipulate the creator to verify that relationship. It's a logical axiom. Literally, the debate is already over. And you can squirm, you can deny it, you can kick and scream. It's just objective. It's just objective. All right, so let's track this back to where we got it. Democritus. Democritus was a prominent figure in atomic theory. He theorized that all material is made up of atoms. He said that atoms were so small that they could not be reduced to anything else. That's the etymology of atom, of course, indivisible. He theorized that the universe is made up of the space with atoms, or the being and the vacuum that is absent of atoms. He called this empty space the void. He pictured atoms as mostly homogeneous. He thought the reason things look different and feel different to us is because they are made up of different configurations and combinations of atoms. He theorized that because everything is made of these infinite atoms, nothing really dies. Everything just changes form. This idea is very similar to the popular concept of today that matter cannot be created or destroyed. Oh, sound familiar? Democritus theorized that motion has always existed. He said that the universe began with atoms moving in all directions. Then the atoms began to collide with similar atoms to form larger entities. Democritus did not believe the universe formed because of a purpose. He only believed it happened because of necessity. He theorized that the void and the being were infinite and expanded in all directions. He also believed that there had to be infinite other worlds that consisted of atoms. Does any of this sound familiar to you? This is quoted from Harvard. But does it sound familiar? Wow, this guy was a freaking savant. This dude was a prophet. He somehow predicted in the 5th century BC that what we would soon figure out with quote unquote science, that there's a void, empty vacuum around us, and everything started with collisions of little atoms, and everything infinitely expands inside the nothingness, and everything is created and composed of indivisible particles called atoms. Wow. How do you know all that? He just came up with it. Wow. It's probably real. Probably legit. Atomism was initially proposed by Democritus, a famous Greek philosopher. Again, atomism at its base is philosophy. Okay, let's get into the atomic theory. Atomic theory is the theory that all matter is made up of tiny, indivisible particles. According to the modern version, the atoms of each element are effectively identical but differ from those of other elements and unite to form compounds in fixed proportions. It's called atomic theory. It's not a scientific theory. All of a sudden, when I apply this same script to your side, which you want to detach yourself from this side, the people that critique the ether, but objectively they're invoking atomism. And when you press them on it, they will indeed begin to make claims within the atomic theory. and reify them. You can't even stand up to your own test. All this arrogance and how smart you are and how stupid Æther believers are has really backfired, I guess. This is weird. Atoms are claimed to be 99.99999% empty space. Of course, there is no such thing as emptiness. Atoms are claimed to be 99.9999% empty space. Wow. They're probably physical little particles that are just 99.99999% empty. Totally legit on its face. Just totally makes sense. Again, a theory. It's a theory. Atoms do not have well-defined boundaries. It is claimed that atoms are more like clouds consisting of distributions of electrons, neutrons, and protons. Oh, they're clouds. They're clouds that are 99% empty. Wow. And if you don't believe this, well, you think there's an ether, you're the one that's stupid. Atoms are not directly observed. We use electric manipulation and motion sensors to recreate images of the alleged atom. Now, you will have Globers, which is ironic, they're on the same side. You will have Globers swear up and down that we see atoms. No, we do not. We do not see atoms. Again, they are claimed to be 99% empty space. We have to use electric manipulation and motion sensors to recreate images of the alleged atom. That is literally how it works. Okay. The model of the atom has never been scientifically proven. It is merely an abstract conceptualization utilized for descriptive and quantitative purposes. Thank you, Tips, for $10 super chat. Much love. It is, again, merely an abstract conceptualization utilized for descriptive and quantitative purposes. It is a mathematical convention, right? If everything's not made of tiny little indivisible particles, how can we count it? We have to count it, so what can we do? And this is this. Hey guys, does this sound familiar? A concept, a mathematical concept that doesn't actually relate to reality. It doesn't actually accurately describe reality. And it's reified as if it's true, and then the math itself is invoked as if it proves it. And this conceptual model is the idea of physical spheres. Does this sound familiar to anybody? A conceptual mathematical model that claims that reality is actually a sphere, but it can't be proven, it's purely mathematical, and then it's reified and presupposed, and the question is begged and then be invoked as if it's proof of the very model that's in contention. Does this sound familiar to anybody? I don't know. Sounds familiar to me. Sounds like July on the globe. Here's the atomic model. Okay, you got 1803, the progression to 1904, 1911, 1913, 1926. This is where it starts to get more technical. Okay, now as you can see, it's constantly changing, kind of like the pictures from NASA, right? And now these are cartoons. Okay, so seeing as how this is a cartoon, this is not actually real. That's right. This isn't real. These are cartoons, not real cartoons. This isn't science. This has nothing to do with science. Okay, and it constantly has to keep changing and updating because it's a fake model used to quantify things that can't be quantified in reality. All right, so I knew I had to do this, so we have a disclaimer next. Disclaimer, this is not as if the claim that the phenomena referred to as the atom is not a real phenomenon. The proper defining of atomic theory is established to elucidate the presupposition that everything is comprised of particles. It is not the phenomena that is in contention, rather the interpretation. Atomism in its purest form is materialism. I'm going to read the disclaimer again because I already know all the alleged rebuttals, right? So this is not as if the claim the phenomena referred to as the atom is not a real phenomenon, because we can indeed isolate that area and/or phenomenon. The proper defining of atomic theory, which we just now did, is established to elucidate the presupposition that everything is comprised of particles. It is not the phenomena that is in contention, rather the interpretation. Atomism in its purest form is materialism, and this is objective. Quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics. the branch of mechanics that deals with the mathematical description of the motion and interaction of subatomic particles, incorporating the concepts of quantization of energy, wave-particle duality, the uncertainty principle, and the correspondence principle. Of course, the uncertainty principle is that they can never actually know and fully understand their little fairy tale model. Option 3, rope theory. Option 4, objective idealism. Okay, rope theory isn't actually an independent theory. Are you saying rope theory doesn't contain the idea of particleism? Objective idealism? How is that answering what the actual fundamental building block is? And we create our own reality. Okay, anyway, so, but thanks for the research. I won't be reading distracted $2. The branch of mechanics that deals with mathematical description of the motion interaction of subatomic particles. Now we just discussed the atom. Now we're talking about getting smaller than the atom. Well, not much smaller, right? I mean, it's just a little smaller than the atom. The atom's so small you can't see it. We have to use electronic manipulation, which is funny. What you're going to discover is that everything requires the manipulation of electrics, the electric nature of everything. It's the only way that any of this pseudoscience is even propped up, right? I can't imagine something defined, like fulfilling the definition of pseudoscience more than a mathematical conceptual model being reified as if it's definitive reality. I can't imagine a better definition of pseudoscience because math describes science, explains its time space incompatible with the idea of science. But anyway, again, and this is a philosophical determination at the onset before we interpret the world. Okay, so quantum mechanics is simply the imposed interpretation of atomism on the smallest scale. QM is intrinsically built upon the reification of atomic theory and subatomic particles. For obvious reasons, without a model comprised of discrete particles, quantification could not be carried out as currently done. The wave function represents the probability amplitude for finding a particle at a given point at a given time and space. Wow. Crazy. Of course, wave-particle duality is stupid. There's no such thing as dualities in nature. That doesn't even make sense. You can't have two things that are contradictory simultaneous. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Oh, debate over again. Debate over again. This position is logically bankrupt at every layer. And we're just getting started. Okay, so anyway. And they describe everything as a wave function. And the wave function represents the probability, because we're not actually sciencing anything. We don't have an actual phenomena that we're manipulating and varying to identify and prove, nothing like that. We are coming up with mathematical probability equations of how probable we think it is that you would find this particle we're assuming is here within a certain area. Wow, very interesting. Subatomic particles. Reification fallacy needs to be defined, okay, so we can really understand what's going on here, because that's all this all is. When an abstraction or abstract belief or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete real event or physical entity. Okay. So it's when an abstraction, an abstract belief or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete real event or physical entity. All right. One must first reify atomic theory prior to making further claims about the composition of an atom, obviously. A subatomic particle is postulated as a particle that composes an atom. According to the standard model of particle physics, a subatomic particle can be either a composite particle, which is composed of other particles, or an elementary particle, which is not composed of other particles. There are three primary subatomic particles that are claimed to compose an atom. This is the proton, neutron, and electron, and everyone's heard of them. And again, the disclaimer applies the same. There's a phenomenon that's not in dispute or contention. It is the interpretation, the materialistic imposition of quantification and, physicality. All right. Electron. As previously covered, the atom has never been directly observed and is claimed to be 99.99999% empty space, clouds of empty space. The electron is speculated to be about 100 million times smaller than the atom. The electron is speculated to be about 100 100 million times smaller than the atom. Now, we can't actually observe the atom. Now, of course, naturally occurring observable phenomena is the first step. We have cartoons of the atom. We're now 100 million times smaller than that. Bruh. And the truth is, the people that are attacking me, they don't know any of this. They don't. Anyway, in fact, it is frequently claimed electrons have no size, rather are point particles that have no specific shape nor volume. However, it is simultaneously claimed that the electrons matter. So it's frequently claimed electrons have no size. They're point particles that have no specific shape or volume. But simultaneously, it is claimed the electron is matter. Seems legit. No contradiction at all. J.J. Thomson is accredited with the discovery of the electron using cathode ray tubes, allegedly establishing that all atoms contain tiny negatively charged subatomic particles. The electron is claimed to be a charge-carrying particle. Like as ʀᴏᴜᴜ would say, like a little clown car driving around with a bunch of clowns in it, that like infinite amount of clowns that just keep coming out of it. It's a particle that carries the charge, like Santa carries his bag. It just carries the charge. Okay, there's no such thing as positive and negative charge. There's only charge and discharge. This is once again a conceptual convention for the purpose of quantification. Of course, how could you quantify discharge, right? Well, you put a negative in front of it. So negative is, again, conceptual quantification. There's only charge and discharge, which is why it doesn't intuitively make any sense to you when they teach you about these models and positive and negative and all this stuff. It's charge and discharge. Charge, discharge. Okay. It is also claimed that an electron is a quantum object with wave-like properties. So it must always be vibrating at some frequency. And then they speculate as to what a rest mass can be because they can't actually determine the rest mass of an electron. Since when did flat earthers jump over on the sides so detached from reality? It's actually baffling. Anyway, it's claimed that until someone or something actually attempts to look at it, the precise location of the electron is uncertain. Wow, it's like magic. So the uncertainty of location is part of the model for the electron, and one can only calculate the probability of finding, which it can't do, an electron within a certain space. Electrons are claimed to be clouds of negative charge density that shift and move with time. What's up with the clouds? The 99.9% clouds. What's up with that? Quantum mechanics claims that an electron can be viewed as a stationary wave or cloud of negative charge. Cloud of negative charge. The reification of these abstractions allow for a calculative description of the amount of negative charge at any given point within this cloud. Should I have the omnidirectional setting on? We are unleaving the audio. I have it on like the other one. Voice quality is not very good. Right. Which one is actually on the section? Give me just a second. Sounds good. Very muffled in the world. Does it sound better now? I changed it. Does it sound better now? We got to get into the important stuff. Oh, there you go. It just got worse. Okay. Is it better now? In a world where no one knows what the world is. I'm not gonna hold it. Oh, I know what I could do. Here. There we go. Problem solved. All right. I think if I go back, this will be good. All right. Just tell me if this sounds better. Hopefully, this sounds better. And we're going to move on. Okay. So, quantum mechanics claims an electron can be viewed as a stationary wave or cloud of negative charge. The reification of these abstractions allow for a calculative description of the amount of negative charge at any given point within this cloud. So, cloud. The electron, which is 100 million times smaller than the atom. Okay, let's see what Nikola Tesla had to say about this. Just a literal genius that could read an entire book, and you could walk up to him 2 years later and ask him what was on page 237, and he knew exactly what it was. But he's stupid, I guess. Nikola Tesla jumped on FED. I guess he would have been berated and called stupid because he told him about the ether. To account for its apparently small mass, science conceives of the electron as a hollow sphere, a sort of bubble. Such a bubble could exist in a medium as a gas or liquid because its internal pressure is not altered by the deformation. But if, as supposed, the internal pressure of an electron is due to the repulsion of electric masses, the slightest conceivable deformation must result in the destruction of the bubble, to mention another improbability. Oh. My ideas regarding the electron are at variance with those generally entertained. I hold that it is a relatively large entity carrying a surface charge and is not an elementary unit particle. When the electron leaves an electrode of high potential and in a high vacuum, it carries an electrostatic charge many times greater than normal. Nikola Tesla. Okay. A.J. Thomson originally stated, who is the person that is attributed to discovering it and actually got the Nobel Prize for it. J.J. Thomson originally stated that the electron is nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction. Unfortunately, to a large extent, in dealing with dielectric fields, the prehistoric conception of the electrostatic charge, the electron, on the conductor still exists, and by its use destroys the analogy between the two components of the electric field, the magnetic and dielectric. This makes the consideration of dielectric fields unnecessarily complicated. Steinmetz. Charles Produce Steinmetz was one of the smartest people ever in modern times, arguably smarter than Nikola Tesla, actually perfected his AC generator and many inventions. You've never heard of him because he destroys the modern paradigm of atomism and relativistic application and the assumption of materialism. But nevertheless, he was a genius. This is in his book, Electric Discharges, Waves, and Impulses. And again, I'm going to read it again. This is one of the more important ones. Unfortunately, to a large extent, in dealing with dielectric fields, the prehistoric conception of the electrostatic charge, the electron, on the conductor still exists, and by its use destroys the analogy between the two components of the electric field, the magnetic and dielectric. This makes the consideration of dielectric fields unnecessarily complicated. You don't say little bombarding material particles that aren't actually particles. They're matter, but they can never be found. We don't know where they are. They're 100 million times smaller than the atom, and we can only know where they are once we look at them, but we still don't know exactly where they are. But we create probability equations to determine where we're going to find them, even though we can't find them, and then we get a resting mass speculatively, even though it's never at rest. And wow. Okay. To describe an electron as a negatively charged body is equivalent to saying that it is an expanding, contracting particle. Wow. Which doesn't make sense. There is no such condition in nature as a negative charge, nor are there negatively charged particles. Charge and discharge are opposite conditions, as filling and emptying, or compressing and expanding are opposite conditions. Walter Russell. Interesting. How dare you not believe in pseudoscience? Thomson developed the ether atom, ideas of Michael Faraday, into his electronic corpuscle. This indivisible unit, one corpuscle terminates on one faradic, I don't actually know how to pronounce it, faradic tube of force, and this quantifies as one coulomb. This, this corpuscle is not an electron. It is a constituent of what today is known incorrectly as an electron. Thomson relates 1,000 corpuscles per electron in this view. That taken by Crookes, Thomson, Tesla. The cathode ray is not electrons, but in actuality corpuscles of the ether, or what they would say is condensate, like little ether condensates, or whatever. These people just are the only ones that gave you the electron society you use today, but there is no rest mass to an electron. It is given here the electron is no more than a broken loose hold fast under the grip of the tensions within the dielectric lines of force. They are the broken ends of the split in the half package of spaghetti. Obviously, this reasoning is not welcome in the realm of Einstein's theory of relativity. What they're calling the electron is nothing more than a gap in the field. It's been well known for a long time. Hence why they have all kinds of contradictory mathematical nonsense used to describe it, because they are materialists confined to particlism, and they have to always fit within the parameters of relativity and relativistic application. So it's just a gap in the field. I tried to simplify a lot of this stuff throughout the presentation to make it understandable. All right, electrons as a separate, distinct entity doesn't really exist. They are merely bumps in something called a field. This makes way more sense, though, than what they say, okay? There's a field. Yeah, there's an etheric background. There's dielectricity, that's the pure potential. The dielectric is there. It's pure potential. It's unmanifest energy. The magnetism is the manifest of the energy, right? And so we have this intrinsic relationship between all of these things. And there's just little gaps within the field. That way we can isolate them because of pressure mediation, right? So when you have energy coming from different directions, it mediates pressure. That should actually be the natural law, pressure mediation, right? And based on the pressure mediation, we're able to isolate certain areas due to that pressure mediation. And what modern psychopathic quantum pseudoscience does is quantifies that gap in the field and then defines it as a physical particle that's matter, but it's 100 million times smaller than the atom, and we can never see it, we can never find it, we don't know where it is, it's never resting, but we have a rest mass for it mathematically. It's a wave function probability, even though we can never find it, but that's the probability of us finding it. This is real. This is actually what they say. Which one's pseudoscience again? See, I'm not even claiming science. I'm claiming a philosophical interpretation, as in a logical axiom within electrical field theory, to have some type of coherent, viable explanation. That's what you're doing as well, only yours is incoherent, logically bankrupt, not viable, due to materialism and relativity. And it is very ironic that you guys think you're somehow standing up for flat Earth right there. In summary, there we go. Electrons are not particles, objects, or material. The phenomenon labeled the electron is simply the dynamic principle of discharge. And so they say that the electron is this little negatively charged, you know, physical material particle moving around this orbit around the nucleus. That's all pseudoscience. It's cartoons. It's effectively like what you turn on when you were a child on Saturday morning, literally. In summary, the electron, it's actually just discharge. That's what the point here is, right? With that part of the presentation. There is no such thing as positive and negative charge. It's charge and discharge. Things are always seeking their equilibrium. Pressure is always mediating. Things have an intrinsic resonance or charge. Is received from the etheric background that is all around you, encompassing this world. That's what energy comes from. And it is constantly in a process of seeking equilibrium. And they are quantifying little characteristics within the process of this equilibrium within this field. And they're calling it different stuff. They're coming up with cartoons. And they're trying to count everything. In summary, the electron is a conceptual abstraction required to be consistent with the framework of the theory of relativity and has no actual basis in reality. It is a model. More accurately defined, the electron is nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction or a gap within the lines of a field. These gaps within the field are isolated and reified as physical particles comprised of material for quantification purposes. However, you cannot quantify the immaterial. You can only create a model to do so. Photon. Photon is defined as a particle representing a quantum of light or other electromagnetic radiation. A photon carries energy proportional to the radiation frequency. It is often described as an electric field that oscillates with a corresponding magnetic field that oscillates. But then they say that people say that light is not electric nor magnetic, because they then beg the question, reify the physical particle called the photon, and they say, how could it be electric or magnetic? Because look, it's not affected by magnetism or charge, and it doesn't have a charge. So if I reify and presuppose the photon and then claim that it doesn't have a charge, therefore I know that it's not electric nor magnetic. It's just always encompassed in electromagnetic radiation and always interacts with it, but it's different and it's not electric nor magnetic. Yikes. What? Did that make sense? Does that make sense to you guys? Interesting. When the truth is lies nothing more than ether perturbation or a rate of induction, and there's no way you can exclude it from electric nature. And in fact, can you give me a light without electricity? Hey, can someone show me any type of light without dielectricity or electricity? Can anyone show me a light that isn't electric or doesn't have an electric source? Take your time. It doesn't exist. It is claimed because the energy introduced actually disturbs the ether, the background that gives you the energy. Anyway, it is claimed that a photon can interact with charged particles and give up part of its energy, or even all of it, and then it disappears. So again, just so everyone understands the reasons that we're doing this, you're like, I thought this was an ether presentation. It is an ether presentation, and the entire point is that it's being attacked as fake and stupid and dumb, and we shouldn't be allowed to talk about it. And there are certain cult leaders of thought running around telling us we're allowed to talk about it. The truth of the matter is that we have two fundamental philosophical, logical frameworks, and we have to choose one of the two. There's never been another one proposed, and that is ether and atomism. And everyone presupposes atomism is real because that's what the mainstream academia and curriculum told them to believe within the confinement of this material little sphere that spins in a vacuum. So we are laying out exactly what that claim entails. As it is presupposed and reified and then even falsely attributed to be science. By the way, that is the actual definition of science. It is claimed that a photon can interact with charged particles and give up part of its energy, or even all of it, and then it disappears. It disappears, bro. Wow, where does it go? Where does it appear from, and where does it disappear to? Well, there's nothing there. There's no ether. So where does it go? It literally disappears into nothingness, which can't exist. The position is so logically bankrupt, it's hard to even say out loud that way. A photon has never been directly observed. Of course, claiming light is a photon and therefore the human eye has seen a photon is a textbook begging the question fallacy. So you say, oh yeah, we can see the photon. Just open your eyes. Look at the sun. Look at your computer screen. That's called begging the question, bro. That's the most remedial fallacy that exists. Okay. We're going to get into all the details, though. You guys just wait. It's claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle in a process known as pair production. It is claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle in a process known as pair production. This is science. That is the most insane thing I've ever even heard. What? Anyway. Also claimed that in this process, the energy of the photon is completely transformed into the mass of the two particles. Like energy and mass are interchangeable, which is part of relativity, which is why we have to claim stupid pseudoscience like this, right? Anyway, it's claimed that in this process, the energy of the photon is completely transformed into the mass of the two particles. For example, a photon can turn into an electron and an anti-electron. Didn't we just discuss the electron? What's the electron again? Oh, yeah. Everything they say about the electron is pseudoscience is completely not real, antithetical to the fatherheads of electrical field theory, antithetical to common sense, Occam's razor, and any type of rationality whatsoever, is not replicated. It's merely a conceptual quantification method. It is a reification fallacy pool with the giant bow on it, and in fact, it's nothing more than a gap in a fill. Every single claim that comes from this point, you're going to see the reification of the electron, which is why we had to define it. Uh-oh. I guess they didn't tell you about that over at FED. I guess you forgot that you had to reify the electron. Uh-oh. The postulation that light consists of physical particles called photons that travel from one place to another can be refuted in numerous ways. For example, I didn't actually put it. Don't worry, I got you. If I shoot a laser through glass, does the laser actually, is the light comprised of a physical particle called the photon that goes through the glass, slows down, and then speeds back up? Well, that would breach the law of conservation of energy and momentum. That's impossible. So, cool story, bro. Make up whatever story you want to by reifying it and trying to explain it away ad hoc. It doesn't matter. The truth of the matter is that light is not a physical particle traveling from point A to point B. It's already there. The glass is doing nothing more than adding an additional medium, impeding your perception or altering it more specifically. All alleged evidence for the photon is built. What did I put here? It is also claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle in a process known as pair production, which is on that twice. All alleged evidence for the photon is built upon textbook reifications. One of the primary motivations for this reification is the theory of relativity. If everything is relative, then there must be an absolute frame of reference for everything to be relative to. Therefore, light must physically travel from point A to point B and must have a constant speed. Oh, I thought we knew relativity was stupid. Ironically, these people are trying to say that ether is akin to relativity and gravity, and actually is needed for relativity, but we'll get into that. Speed of light. Special relativity attributed a constant speed to light, or c, and claims that speed of light is 300,000 kilometers a second, or 186,000 miles a second. There is no actual measurement of the one-way speed of light, rather an average of a two-way speed. This convention presupposes that light travels from point A to point B and reifies the theory of relativity. Einstein postulated this claim in an attempt to explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment, which we will cover later in the presentation. So there is no such thing as the speed of light. They don't actually measure the one-way speed of light. They actually take the constant of the two-way speed. Every time you say speed, you're reifying and begging the question. But anyway, what they do is they have light, and then they use a mirror to reflect it. And then what they do is claim there's a speed of light. They don't have a speed of light. Light is actually instant. We're going to get into it, though. So if light's already there and all you're doing is quantifying the rate of induction or perception, excitation, illumination, this isn't word salad if it actually makes sense. You can save that one. And then you just perceive it. The fact you put a mirror over there that reflects the image of everything that we see just means that you delay how long it takes you to see it the second time, because it's actually just capturing and showing you what is there. That doesn't mean light is physically traveling from point A to point B. Wipe the drool off your mouth. I'm sorry, that's absolutely ridiculous, bro. So there is no such thing. There is no such thing, and admittedly, they don't have anything but a two-way speed of light. It is a convention used to prop up relativity. Of course, if light is instant and doesn't have a speed, could it be a physical particle that travels from point A to point B? This assumption violates the law of conservation of energy in numerous observations. For example, luminal interactions with water, glass, etc., as we just covered. The light cannot slow down and speed back up as there is no external introduction of energy. Photon debunked. Speed of light debunked. The debate's been over 10 times already. Anyway, there are multiple observations that seemingly falsify the claim of the maximum speed of light, such as it has been demonstrated that ultra-low frequency voltage signals in coaxial cables with a length of only a few hundred meters can propagate up to 3 times the alleged speed of light, and it has been buried by the mainstream. I will offer greater detail in future shows. It has also been experimentally shown that voltage fluctuations in ordinary but electrically short copper lines move at signal velocities that are significantly higher than the speed of light in a vacuum. which of course there's no such thing as a perfect vacuum, but that's where they get their speed of light. And just because there's no such thing as a perfect vacuum, that's a concept, and there's at least a few hydrogen atoms per cubic meter, which is also a concept. Where are your gas particles, by the way? Can you show them to me? Anyway, the point here is that you can, in fact, get results and learn things by removing and controlling variables the best that you can, and this includes air. So vacuum chambers are not useless. It's just ridiculous way to look at the world. And all of a sudden, oh, you can't talk about it. Stop making sense with it. Yeah. Here we go. Another one. Gain-assisted linear anomalous dispersion has been used to demonstrate superluminal light propagation in atomic cesium gas. A light pulse propagating through the atomic vapor cell appears in the exit so much earlier than if it had propagated in a vacuum that the peak of the pulse appears to leave the cell before entering it. Whoa. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. How does that work if there's a speed of light, bro? If light's traveling from point A to point B, then how does it appear that it exits faster than it enters it? How do we go over 3 times the alleged speed of light? That doesn't mean that once we go 3 times, that's the new speed. There isn't a speed. All we're doing is maximizing the quantification, specifically the quantification of illumination, specifically the rate of induction. In actuality, light does not have a speed, but it does have a rate of induction. This rate of induction is relative to the media involved. When light enters glass, it does not slow down and speed back up as would violate the conservation of energy and momentum. Rather, the glass acts as an additional medium, altering the perception of what we call light. Light is a disturbance in the background and this energetic excitation results in illumination. We quantify the rate of perception, meaning how fast we see it, which is actually the rate of induction into the background medium. Light is instantaneous. It is already there. Light obviously cannot be a physical particle traveling from point A to point B or point to point. If light is instant, as this is intrinsically contradictory and logically bankrupt. Everyone following this here? Light is nothing more than a disturbance in the ether. Let me give you the analogy of sound. So everyone seems to think that sound, as I'm talking to this mic, that I'm like emitting some sound and it's traveling from point A to point B. There is no emission of sound. There is no emission of light either. Now, these are 2 different frameworks again, okay? I am not claiming to scientifically prove this. What I'm claiming to do is elucidate it as the only logically viable explanation. And if we only have one logically viable explanation, then we know the answer. Get it? So anyway, just like when I'm talking here, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a vibration, like an oscillation, a vibration. That's what you do when you talk or sing, right? Creating a vibration which creates a disturbance in the air, a disturbance in the medium, right? It's a perturbation of the air. And the perturbation of the air, disturbance of the air, vibration of the air, right, results in what we call sound. Well, there's the speed of sound. Again, we're quantifying the disturbance. The air was already there. The air did not travel from this side of the room to that side of the room. When I scream across a football field, there was air there already, bro, in case you didn't know. Okay, the medium for sound is air, and then the medium for light is, as Tesla would say, light is nothing more than a sound wave in the ether. Hope that makes sense to you. It's actually not complicated. In fact, divinity is simplicity. What we see in the world is not overly complicated. It has been made overly complicated because of materialism, and they want to keep you from utilizing your intuitive understanding of this world. Parametric down conversion. Parametric down conversion is a nonlinear crystal. A nonlinear crystal is used to split photon beams into pairs of photons that, in accordance with the law of conservation of energy and law of conservation of momentum, have combined energies and momenta equal to the energy and momentum of the original photon and crystal lattice, are phase matched in the frequency domain. This is claimed as proof of the photon. It is claimed the incoming photon interacts with the electric field within the crystal, which is assumed to be a coherent squeezed state of photons. One must reify and assume the photon. To claim this somehow verifies the existence of a physical particle called a photon. The crystal alters the state of the disturbance that is light, and it interacts with the electric field of the crystal. Reification fallacies prove nothing. Exactly. That's all that this is, a manipulation of the actual disturbance that is light. Disturbance in the ether is altered once you introduce additional energy, being the electric field of the crystal. I thought that they weren't. I thought light wasn't affected by electricity though. Photoelectric effect. These are claims that allegedly prove the photon is a physical particle. That light is a physical particle called a photon. Albert Einstein, you ever heard of that guy? Was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921 for his services to theoretical physics, and especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. That's actually the citation of the Nobel Prize that he won. Okay, what is this photoelectric effect? It's a phenomenon in which electrically charged particles are released from or within a material when it absorbs electromagnetic radiation or light. The effect is often defined as the ejection of electrons from a metal plate when light falls on it. The photoelectric effect is claimed to be a resonance phenomenon in which a photon is absorbed and an ejection or an electron is ejected. You have a metal plate, you shine light on it. They claim that a physical particle called a photon comes and hits it, exchanges energy to the atom, dislodging the electron from the atom, and then the rest of its energy is given to the electron, and then it disappears, and it becomes a photoelectron. This effect is invoked as if to prove that light consists of physical particles called photons. It's claimed that the photon collides with an atom and transfers its energy to an inner orbital electron, causing the ejection of the electron from the atom. Wow. Yeah, but if we just claim it, it becomes real. We just claim that that's what's happening. That proves that's what's happening. I think there's a word for that. There's like a phrase. Oh, it's called begging the question. It is claimed that each particle of light, the photon, allegedly, collides with an electron and uses some of its energy to dislodge the electron. The rest of the photon's energy transfers to the free negative charge called a photoelectron. Free negative charge being this electron that is freed and loosed from its oppressive hold of the atom. Is the audio sounding pretty good? Hopefully I sound good. If I'm too loud or too close or whatever, I will act accordingly. So you guys hear the pseudoscience that I'm telling you? I'm not making this up. This is mainstream academia, and this is actually what the side that claims Æther stupid believes, whether they believe it or not. All right. So that's kind of true. Sounds good. Oh, a bit garbled. Maybe I'm too close now. I don't really know. I'm trying. I know I do have a really good mic, so this won't be a problem in the future. I did not have time to set it all up. Moving on. It is claimed that an electron has half the spin of a photon. The audio sounds like crap, but we can understand the rest of the time. Is it that bad? Oh my gosh. I don't know why, man. Audio is- I have no idea what to do. How about a photo of an electron? Sure, you can't get a photo of an atom. You can get a photo of an electron 100 million times smaller than that. Is the audio really that bad? Dang, bro. I don't know how I could possibly fix it. Well, as long as you guys can hear me, there's nothing I don't know what to do. Like I said, this won't be a consistent problem because I do have a good mic, but I couldn't get it set up with the audio interface. have no idea. Like I am really close to the mic. Maybe it's better when I get away. Sounds great when you're right on top of it. Yeah, I'm getting all kinds of contradictory things. I don't know. I think you're using your camera. I should be using settings, audio. Nope, I'm using the in a world. There, I mean, it's still the Blue Yeti, but it went to I don't know. Maybe this is better. Maybe this sounds better. I don't know. This is really frustrating at this point. I'm just going to continue to go. Oh, it sounds better now? Oh, so the whole presentation, we should start the whole presentation over. Oh, I'm so salty, bro. Wow. I really should start the whole presentation over. In a world. Look what I'm gonna do. Get triggered if you want to get triggered, but I'm moving back some. Wow, bro. I'm so salty. Should I really start over? Was it that bad? If you guys are down for me to start over, I will. I literally will. Everyone vote. If you want me to start the stream, if you want me to start the presentation back over, I'll just put in the description what it is if it was that bad. So press 1 if you think I should start it back over, and then press 2 if you think I should keep going from where I am. I'm actually going to go to the bathroom. I'll come back and look. I'm going to play my song while I do it. It's all good, and I'll just put in the description the note, because it must have sounded really bad. And I'll just tell whoever comes to the stream, like, skip to this far down. Everyone's putting 1. All right, I'll be right back, and we're going to restart the stream, and then we'll actually get into some gravy.
That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers acting steady high, steady simple pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up, had to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in the field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Took the way you saw the world, then distorted it. Now you think you wanna rock and twirl somewhere orbiting. Theories disproportionate, the truth distorted quick with a forceful grip. They force a misinfo that we absorbing quick. Took the people's signature to mean extorted it. They forging it. If news anchors informant to informing them, there's a surplus, but they tell us there are shortages. Credit economy mortgages, dollar that's supported with empty fortresses. But what's important is this: we courting ships, important gifts. Of course it is, but extortion is in accordance with an assortment list of foreign tricks we ignoring, which informing this, informing this. It looked like we were snoring tricks. Pedophilia and the
government endorsing it. What's up, fam? All right, 2. It was fine. You're the only one that put 2. I think there's some 2s. All right, so what we're gonna do to make everyone happy the best I can is I'm gonna go through it quickly. Okay, I'm gonna go through it quickly till we get back to the photoelectric effect. But I am going to start it back over because I put a lot of time and effort into this, and I don't want it to sound really bad. And then we'll just denote the time in the description. So I'll tell everyone to start the stream here so they can watch the presentation. You don't have to be here if you don't want to, or you can come back in a few minutes. Okay. Play from beginning. Let's do it. All right. What is the Æther? The Æther is a proposed logical foundation of interpretation. It is a philosophical framework. Æther is postulated to be an energetic metaphysical background that acts as a medium or substrate for electromagnetic phenomena. More specifically, it is pure potential that acts as the essence of all field modalities. Put another way, it is what comprises all fields. Æther is proposed as non-Cartesian counterspatial inertia. Thus, the Æther is absolute and is not amenable to ordinary measurement. It is not Cartesian as in X, Y, Z coordinate systems. It's not there or here or where is it. It is non-Cartesian. It is a counterspatial inertia, meaning it is absolute, And counter space is the etheric realm, meaning it's not like you have one room here, a line, and then the ether. It's overlaid. It's dimensional, as you cannot see all things. Ether acts as the medium in which the phenomena of light, electrical actions at a distance, and propagation takes place. The ether is immaterial, thus intrinsically cannot be science, nor is it quantifiable. Defining of the terms as applied. Metaphysical means transcending physical matter, beyond the physical material world. Background, the area or scenery behind the main object of contemplation, the material world in this case, especially perceived as a framework for it. Just continue the stream and make a new one. No. Oh, yeah. Anyway, medium, the background frame that makes possible the transfer of energy from one location to another, especially through waves. Although waves are not things in and of themselves, wave is not what something is, it's what something does. Therefore, you have to have a medium to have the wave. Substrate, an underlying substance or layer. Counter space, non-dimensional etheric realm. Pure potential, unmanifest energy, homeostasis in counter space. Okay. Here's the critique that the people running around bashing all the ether believers have been putting forward as if they're intellectually superior. The ether falls outside the scope of scientific verification and validation, thus cannot be proven. Natural science is the study of the natural world, thus claims pertaining to the natural world should adhere to the parameters of natural science by way of the scientific method and scientific experimentation. There are three constituent parts of a scientific experiment: dependent, independent, and control variables. You must first observe a naturally occurring phenomena, dependent variable. Secondly, you must propose a cause and effect relationship test, the hypothesis. And lastly, you manipulate the presupposed cause or the independent variable to validate it is in fact the cause of the observed effect. The ether is postulated to be immaterial, therefore intrinsically cannot meet these requirements. Again, the crux of it is that the argument or critique against people talking about the ether is that it's outside the scope of scientific validation and it cannot be proven. They go as far as to say is that they know it's not real. Anyway, this is the problem with that. There are two fundamental frameworks that have ever been proposed to interpret phenomena within the natural world: atomism and the ether. Prior to any attempt to understand the natural world, one must first determine a foundational framework of interpretation. One must. It is the first step. This inevitably confines us to a philosophical determination at the onset of our pursuit to understand the natural world. Therefore, we have to make a philosophical, logical interpretation decision prior to us going forward. You can do science all day. Doesn't matter what you do if you can't interpret it. What you're going to do with the information if you don't have a logical framework of interpretation. Quantification is not science, rather is merely a description. Math describes, science explains. In order to explain phenomena, we must first apply a framework of interpretation. Two options sit before us: atomism or the ether. And of course, as you say, you can't talk about it if you can't science it. The second law of thermodynamics is not science. You have no problem talking about that. What's the independent variable of entropy? The point is that we observe it. We know it to be the case, just like downward electric current on the earth, but I digress. Atomism is a theoretical approach that regards something as interpretable through analysis into distinct, separable, and independent elementary components. A doctrine that the physical and mental universe is composed of simple, indivisible, minute particles. Atomism is, by definition, philosophy. It's philosophy. Atomism is birthed from the perceived necessity to quantify all things. Thus, the need for quantification dictates an atomistic application. Simply put, everything must be a particle or it cannot be counted. Atomism is proposed as a philosophical framework to interpret the natural world. Thus, the same critique previously covered can be equally applied to atomism. Meaning, if you say, you're not allowed to talk about it, oh, it's not science, oh, you didn't prove it, oh, you can apply that same critique to the framework of atomism, which is assumed. So debate over. That's slide number 3, debate over. It's not pseudoscience if it doesn't claim to be science. The ether cannot be science. It's immaterial. It is a logical framework to interpret phenomena. So everything you say from this point forward about independent variables and science is a non sequitur. Ironically, the very thing that you're claiming and pretending to be science is philosophy. So you, ironically, are the only one actually guilty of pseudoscience. Debate over. Further, atomism is a philosophy confined to a materialistic need for quantification. Materialism is a theory that physical matter is the only or fundamental reality, and that all being, processes, and phenomena can be explained as manifestations or results of matter. Implication of the claim. If something is not physically manifest within the material world, then it does not exist. Has anyone heard that recently? Anyone heard that? I've heard someone say that recently. Actually, I heard someone say that in the form of screaming and cussing over me. Non-manifest? If it's non-manifest, that means it does not exist. That is by definition, literally, by definition, materialism, which is the claim that if something is not physically manifest within the material world, then it does not exist. This framework is logically bankrupt on its face for obvious reasons. Examples to the contrary: intuition, memory, dreams, consciousness, and of course, the creator, to name a few. As we can know, the necessary antecedent to creation or design is a designer. That is a logical axiom. That is not science. You cannot independently manipulate the creator, yet we know that design requires a designer, an intelligent design. Whew. Oh, you can't science it. No, man. Yeah. It's called logic. Due to the inevitability of the metaphysical alone, this philosophy holds no logical viability whatsoever. Debate over again. Debate over. Objectively, the debate's over. All right, we'll move on. Democritus. Democritus was a prominent figure in atomic theory. He theorized that all matter is made up of atoms. He said that atoms were so small that they could not be reduced to anything else. He theorized that the universe is made up of the space with atoms, or the being and the vacuum that is absent of atoms. He called this empty space the void. He pictured atoms as mostly homogeneous. He thought the reason things look different and feel different to us is because they are made up of a different configuration and combinations of atoms. He theorized this because everything is made. He theorized that because everything is made of these infinite atoms, nothing really dies. Everything just changes form. This idea is very similar to the popular concept of the day that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. Democritus theorized that motion has always existed. He said that the universe began with atoms moving in all directions. Then the atoms began to collide with similar atoms to form larger entities. Democritus did not believe the universe formed because of a purpose. He only believed it happened because of necessity. He theorized that the void and the being were infinite and expanded in all directions. He also believed that there had to be infinite other worlds that consisted of atoms. I took this from Harvard. Of course, this is hilarious. And this is the 5th century BC. This guy was somehow a prophet and happened to know everything that quote unquote science discovered, which is that everything is made up of indivisible little particles and everything's made up of atoms, and atoms real and nothing's outside of it. He actually even thought emotion itself was made up of physical particles. And he thought that everything around us was a void of empty nothingness and it expanded in all directions, and it had no purpose at the time of it being created, but rather was random and chaotic. This is literally the philosophy of atomism, the foundation for atomic theory. It is proposed by Democritus. Atomism was initially proposed by Democritus, a famous Greek philosopher. Again, atomism at its base is philosophy. Atomic theory is the theory that all matter is made up of tiny indivisible particles. According to the modern version, the atoms of each element are effectively identical, but differ to those of other elements and unite to form compounds in fixed proportions. Atoms are claimed to be 99.99999% empty space. Wow. Atoms do not have well-defined boundaries. It is claimed their atoms are more like clouds, consisting of distributions of electrons, neutrons, and protons. Oh, so they're clouds that are 99.9999999% empty space. Totally real. This is totally real science. If you think that there's an ether, and you have a framework of an ether, you're crazy, stupid, dumb, pseudoscientist, blah, 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 blah. But we know it's not science. It's immaterial. It can't be science. So we are objectively not doing anything related to pseudoscience. You're claiming that this is science, and yet it's actually a theory that you haven't been intelligent enough to dissect enough to realize it's a theory. You presupposed it via brainwashing and indoctrination, and it is the claim that everything's made up of distinct, definitive, little bitty particles, and that they're indivisible, and they're 99.99999% empty space. What a cool story. Atoms are not directly observed. We used electric manipulation and motion sensors to recreate images of the alleged atom. Again, if you talk to a globe zealot, they'll try to tell you, oh, we see atoms, you're so stupid. Ironically, they are on the same side of those clowns in this situation, but you do not actually see an atom. We use electric manipulation as we typically do to do anything. And then we use motion sensors to recreate an image based on different types of, technically, pressure mediation. Kamala Harris 2024. Yikes. The model of the atom has never been scientifically proven. It is merely an abstract conceptualization utilized for descriptive and quantitative purposes. It's a model. It's a concept. It's an abstraction. So that's, again, this comes down to the fundamental decision at the beginning. How are we going to interpret? What's the framework we're going to interpret the natural world with? And we have two options. Here's atomic models. We have the progression from 1803 to 1926. These are cartoons. And seeing as how these are cartoons and not actual, similar to like when you look up satellites in space, you see just a bunch of cartoons. These are not real. Okay, so this is actually not real. So disclaimer, this is not as if to claim the phenomena referred to as the atom is not a real phenomenon. The proper defining of atomic theory is established to elucidate the presupposition that everything is comprised of particles. It is not the phenomenon that is in contention, rather the interpretation. Atomism in its purest form is materialism. So we are not actually denying the phenomenon, we're denying your reified interpretation of it. Quantum mechanics is the branch of mechanics that deals with the mathematical description of the motion and interaction of subatomic particles, incorporating the concepts of quantization of energy, wave particle duality, the uncertainty principle, and the correspondence principle. No such thing as wave particle dualities. Dualities do not exist in nature and are just antithetical to Occam's razor and common sense. Quantum mechanics is simply the imposed interpretation of atomism on the smallest scale. QM is intrinsically built upon the reification of atomic theory and subatomic particles. For obvious reasons, without a model comprised of discrete particles, quantification could not be carried out as is currently done. The wave function represents the probability amplitude of finding a particle at a given point in a given time and space. Oh, yikes. So it's a bunch of math. Oh, it's a conceptual model about how things are little physical spheres that don't match reality, but are reified and assumed, and then the assumption and the quantification of the model is proposed as evidence. Sound familiar? Subatomic particles. Reification fallacy needs to be defined when an abstraction or abstract belief or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete real event or physical entity. One must first reify atomic theory prior to making further claims about the composition of an atom. A subatomic particle is postulated as a particle that composes an atom according to the standard model of particle physics. A subatomic particle can be either a composite particle, which is composed of other particles, or an elementary particle, which is not composed of other particles. Should have continued to 1.5 hour. Look, you don't have to stay here, man. There are three primary subatomic particles that are claimed to compose an atom: the proton, neutron, and electron. Electron, as previously covered, the atom has never been directly observed and is claimed to be 99.99999% empty space. The electron is speculated to be about 100 million times smaller than that. In fact, it is frequently claimed electrons have no size, rather are point particles that have no specific shape nor volume. However, it is simultaneously claimed that the electron is matter. Oh, the electron has no size, but it's material. Totally logical. J.J. Thomson is accredited with the discovery of the electron using cathode ray tubes, allegedly establishing that all atoms contain tiny negatively charged subatomic particles. The electron is claimed to be a charge-carrying particle. Take your time. Am I going too fast? So they claim that the electron is a charge-carrying particle. Okay, and this point, like I said earlier, a bunch of people were like, oh, this was about the ether. It is about the ether. This is a fundamental philosophical framework we're using to apply to the world and understand it. We have two options. Again, that's atomism or ether. You can cry about it, pretend we don't, make stuff up, but that's just the truth. And there's the only two that have ever been proposed. One is assumed true across the board. The other was thrown out because of a devotion to heliocentrism. We are going to point out and elucidate the absurdity of one of the claims, and then you guys can tell me exactly which one is more viable. All right. There is no such thing as positive and negative charge. There is only charge and discharge. This is, once again, a conceptual convention for the purpose of quantification. How else could you quantify something discharging comparative to something having charge, as opposed to calling one positive and calling one negative? Yeah, you don't have to stay. Exactly. Okay. It is also claimed that an electron is a quantum object with wave-like properties. So it must always be vibrating at some frequency. Wave-like properties. It is claimed that until someone or something actually attempts to look at it, the precise location of the electron is uncertain. Of course, you literally can't look at it or see it. But anyway, they're saying that you actually can't know the location until you look at it, but you can't actually look at it. And all we can do is come up with a wave probability function, meaning how likely we think it is that you would find one in a certain area. This is considered science. If you're going against the ether, you are invoking atomism. This is what you think is true. And again, the debate was literally over on the second or third slide, because the fundamental part here is when you claim that you can't prove it and it's not science. Well, neither is your position. They're both philosophical, and one is logically bankrupt. So your critique is literally irrelevant and can be equally applied to your own position. You can deny it and try to twist it and make up stuff, but it's just a fact. The uncertainty of location is part of the model for the electron, and one can only calculate the probability of finding an electron within a certain space, even though it can't be found. Electrons are claimed to be clouds of negative charge density that shift and move with time. Again, it's nothing more than isolated areas of discharge. Quantum mechanics claims that an electron can be viewed as a stationary wave or a cloud of negative charge. The reification of these abstractions allow for a calculative description of the amount of negative charge at any given point within this cloud. It's just a bunch of math and concepts and models used to quantify, and they want to quantify the immaterial. When you conflate your quantification with reality, you've lost the plot. To account for its apparently small mass, science conceives of the electron as a hollow sphere, a sort of bubble. Such a bubble could exist in a medium as a gas or liquid because its internal pressure is not altered by deformation. But if, as supposed, the internal pressure of an electron is due to the repulsion of electric masses, the slightest conceivable deformation must result in the destruction of the bubble. Just to mention another improbability. That's Nikola Tesla in an interview explaining how he in no way believes electrons and thinks that they're very remedial and retarded. My ideas regarding the electron are at variance with those generally entertained. I hold that it is relatively large entity carrying a surface charge and is not an elementary unit particle. When the electron leaves an electrode of high potential and in a high vacuum, it carries an electrostatic charge many times greater than normal. Nikola Tesla. J.J. Thomson originally stated the electron is nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction. It's the end of a line of induction. Unfortunately, to a large extent in dealing with dielectric fields, the prehistoric conception of the electrostatic charge, the electron, or the conductor still exists, and by its use destroys the analogy between the two components of the electric field, the magnetic and the dielectric. This makes the consideration of dielectric fields unnecessarily complicated. This is Charles Produce Steinmetz, who was a genius and arguably smarter than Nikola Tesla and perfected his AC generator. You've never heard of him because he was so smart and because he broke things down so efficiently and because he really started to crack the code of electrical field theory. To describe an electron as a negatively charged body is equivalent to saying that it is an expanding and contracting particle. There is no such condition in nature as a negative charge, nor are there negatively charged particles. Charge and discharge are opposite conditions, as filling and emptying or compressing and expanding are opposite conditions. Walter Russell. There is no such thing as negative charge, it's simply discharge. Thomson developed the ether atom ideas from Michael Faraday into his electronic corpuscle. This indivisible unit, one corpuscle, terminates on one Faradic tube of force, and this quantifies as one coulomb. This corpuscle is not an electron. It is a constituent of what today is known incorrectly as an electron. Thomson relates 1,000 corpuscles per electron. In this view that was taken by Crookes and J.J. Thomson and Tesla, the cathode ray is not electrons, but in actuality, corpuscles of the ether, or they would call it ether condensates. Condensation concentrations, if you will. That's Eric Dollard. There is no rest mass to an electron. It is given here the electron is no more than a broken loose holdfast under the grip of the tensions within the dielectric lines of force. They are the broken ends of the split in half package of spaghetti. Obviously, this reasoning is not welcome in the realm of Einstein's theory of relativity. That is, of course, why it was done away with. Electrons as a separate, distinct entity doesn't really exist. They are merely bumps in something called a field. Can you define field for me? Quantum mechanic atomus. But we'll get to it. It's nothing more than the gap in a field. Draw a little dotted line, and the area in between the dotted line is what they call an electron. It's the terminal end of the lines of dielectric conduction in a field. Little breaks in the field, they count them, they quantify them. The way that they're able to do this, because again, the phenomena is real, the interpretation is logically bankrupt. They act like they can draw a circle there, and they pretend there's a physical particle there, and they don't even acknowledge the field or define it or know what it is. But the truth of the matter is it's pressure being mediated. Energy always mediates pressure. Everything is about pressure mediation. So you can isolate this area because of the pressure mediated around it, right? And it'll give you you can use all kinds of electronic manipulation and imaging tools to find the isolated areas with contrast based on the pressure that's mediated. And they call that an electron, which they claim is 100 million times smaller than the atom that they can't see or prove. And electrons are not particles, objects, or material. The phenomena labeled the electron is simply the dynamic principle of discharge. Pretty simple. In summary, the electron is a conceptual abstraction required to be consistent with the framework of the theory of relativity and has no actual basis in reality. It is a model. More accurately defined, the electron is nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric conduction, or a gap within the lines of a field. These gaps within the field are isolated and reified as physical particles comprised of material for quantification purposes. However, you cannot quantify the immaterial. You can only try to create a model to do so. That's it. It's just a model attempting to quantify the immaterial. Now we're going to get into the photon, and as you will find, a lot of the electron reification is required for what they claim about it. Photon, a particle representing a quantum of light or other electromagnetic radiation. A photon carries energy proportional to the radiation frequency. It is often described as an electric field that oscillates with a corresponding magnetic field that oscillates. One of the primary arguments people are now making is that light is neither electric nor magnetic. Of course, can you please explain to me how you would know that without the reification of the photon and then claiming that the photon is neutral? You know why you claim the photon is neutral? Because the photon isn't real. It's not a real physical particle. You made that up. It's a convention and a concept in your mind. Of course, you claim it's neutral and not affected by things. So when you say, hey, look, there's this physical particle here and it's not actually there, and then you reify it and say, look, it's not affected by electricity or magnetism, that's ridiculous if you think that somehow holds weight. The truth is that every time you ever find light, it's within electromagnetic radiation, and it waves and oscillates. It's a field of electromagnetic radiation. Oh, it's just always encompassed with it, but it pulls it from around it. It's its own little magical sphere in the middle of it that I can't prove and I can't see. It's not electric or magnetic. It's not affected by electric or magnetic. It's because it's not there. What you're claiming is not there. Of course you can say that. And you can play semantical arguments with electric, magnetic, and electromagnetic defined within modern materialism and misdefined within what people don't even understand. Can you please explain to me how you can explain to me what something is, or that something is not magnetic, or that something is not electromagnetic when you can't even define the word magnetism? How can you tell someone that something's not magnetic until you can define the word magnetism? And to wrap that point up, I would love if you could show me some light that exists without something electric. It doesn't exist. You use electric manipulation, and it introduces energy into the ether, creating a disturbance, which illuminates the background, and that's what you call light. It is claimed that a photon can interact with charged particles and give up part of its energy or even all of it, and then it disappears. Where does it disappear to, and where do photons come from? There's nothing there, remember? There's nothing outside the material world. So where does it disappear to? Oh, how convenient. It disappears. It gives energy to other reified physical particles, and then it disappears. This is the modern mainstream claim. A photon has never been directly observed, of course. Claiming light is a photon, and therefore the human eye has seen a photon, is a textbook begging the question fallacy. You cannot see a photon. Claiming that, oh, well, look, you can see light. Yeah, you can see a photon, is very remedial and very fallacious. It is claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle in a process known as a pair production. I'll just read that again. It is claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle, a process known as pair production. It is claimed that in this process, the energy of the photon is completely transformed into the mass of the two particles. For example, a photon can turn into an electron and an anti-electron. You remember we just discussed electron, right? Oh, well, now they're telling us that photons can turn into electrons and anti-electrons. Wow. Just keep that in mind for later in the presentation. The postulation that light consists of physical particles called photons that travel from one place to another can be refuted in numerous ways. It is also claimed that a photon can spontaneously degenerate into a particle with mass and its antiparticle in a process known as a pair production, which I kind of messed this up, obviously, with this slide. All alleged evidence for the photon is built upon textbook reifications. In a world. All right, here we go. Everyone keep it cool, man. Keep it cool. All right. All alleged evidence for the photon is built upon textbook reifications. One of the primary motivations for this reification is the theory of relativity. If everything is relative, then there must be an absolute frame of reference for everything to be relative to. Therefore, light must physically travel from point A to point B and must have a constant speed. Because they had to have an absolute frame of reference, Einstein chose light as if to attempt to make his claim unfalsifiable. Speed of light. Special relativity attributed a constant speed to light, c, and claims that speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second or 186,000 miles a second. Einstein postulated this claim in an attempt to explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment, which we will cover later in the presentation. There is no actual measurement of the one-way speed of light, rather an average of a two-way speed. This convention presupposes that light travels from point A to point B and reifies the theory of relativity. So they don't actually measure how fast light goes somewhere. That's not what happens. Light is instant. It's already there. What they do is they use a mirror and then they get an average and then they formulate a speed based on the reflection of a mirror. And of course, if light's already there and just becomes illuminated, and then you have something called a mirror that reflects what you see, and as it becomes illuminated, there's a delay for you to see it reflect. That doesn't mean it's traveling from point A to point B. That's very, very remedial, dumb, archaic, not even archaic, just stupid way to look at the phenomena and the world. It's like cavemen scratching their head with their clipboard trying to count something that's immaterial and pretending it's profound. They don't have an actual speed of light. They have a convention of an average of a two-way speed. Light's actually instant. And if light is instant, can it be a physical particle traveling from point A to point B? Of course not. This assumption violates the law of conservation of energy in numerous observations. For example, luminal interactions with water, glass, etc., as the light cannot slow down and speed back up as there is no external introduction of energy. So light is not a physical particle called the photon that goes and enters the glass and then slows down and then speeds back up once it exits the glass. The glass is just changing your perception of the light. That's all that's happening because there's an additional medium. You can't slow down and speed back up with no energy introduced because that violates the law of conservation of energy. There are multiple observations that seemingly falsify the claim of the maximum speed of light, such as it has been demonstrated that ultra-low frequency voltage signals in coaxial cables with a length of only a few hundred meters can propagate up to 3 times the alleged speed of light. Of course, they claim nothing can go faster than the speed of light. It has also been experimentally shown that voltage fluctuations in ordinary but electrically short copper lines move at signal velocities that are significantly higher than the speed of light in a vacuum. To be fair, most of these people that are attacking the ether that are flat earthers, they don't really claim a speed of light. The problem is you are claiming that there does exist a speed. And if you're claiming that the speed of light is not true, what is the speed and how do you know there is one? And if it's instant, then how could it be a physical particle traveling from point A to point B? Anyway,
Gain-assisted linear anomalous dispersion has been used to demonstrate superluminal light propagation in atomic caesium gas. A light pulse propagating through the atomic vapor cell appears at the exit so much earlier than if it had propagated in a vacuum that the peak of the pulse appears to leave the cell before entering it. Wow. Glad to have you back, brother. Thank you for the stream. One love. Thank you. Awesome. Much love, brother. Yeah, and I will do streams in the future to go in depth with this. And of course, they are going to do everything they can in the mainstream to bury these things. But these have been experimentally demonstrated. It's an experiment. In actuality, light does not have a speed, but it does have a rate of induction. This rate of induction is relative to the media involved. When light enters glass, it does not slow down and speed back up, as would violate the conservation of energy and momentum. Rather, the glass acts as an additional medium, altering the perception of what we call light. Light is a disturbance in the background, and this energetic excitation results in illumination. We quantify the rate of perception, which is actually the rate of induction into the background medium. Light is instantaneous. It is already there. Light obviously cannot be a physical particle traveling from point to point if light is instant, as this is intrinsically contradictory and logically bankrupt. So, of course, they will claim there's no way to know that it's instant. There's no way to know that it's not instant because our observations show us that it is instant. And the fact that we have a rate of induction doesn't mean anything. There's a rate of induction, right? And then they quantify that as speed, meaning think about it as it absorbs it. It's absorbing the energy. There's a rate of induction, and then based on the energy you put into the ether, you create a disturbance. The ether absorbs this energy. It induces it more specifically, and that induction illuminates and excites. And that's what you call light, but actually it's just the perception of the illumination. Once the medium becomes perceivable, the background becomes perceivable because it is excited. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that people understand this part. The analogy of sound, right? So when people think when I'm talking to this microphone, that sound's coming out of my mouth and traveling to the microphone. If I scream across a football field, that it's traveling across there. And that's why it takes a second to hear the sound from really far away. This is not true, however. The truth is that we're vibrating. We create a vibration and a disturbance in the air. It's an air perturbation. It's a perturbation of the air, and that disturbance is what gives you sound. Oh, there's a speed of sound. We quantify the disturbance of the air, but the air was already there. The air is the medium that gives you the sound. So it didn't travel across the football field. The air was still on the other side of the football field. Does this make sense? And the point is the same thing is true with light, as opposed to a perturbation of the air as with sound. Light is a perturbation of the ether. As Nikola Tesla said, light is nothing more than a sound wave in the ether. And he actually said can be nothing more than a sound wave in the ether. He also explained, how could a candle that you light with a little flame, how can that light travel the same as like the sun? It makes no sense logically on its face. But anyway, I hope that this made sense. It's nothing more than excitation of the background. You can't just call something word salad. If you don't understand it, use Google or go read electrical field theory, because just because modern times don't define things properly doesn't mean you're somehow right. That's called semantics. Okay, so again, the whole point is that if it's already there, light obviously cannot be a physical particle traveling from point A to point B if it is instant. These are the things claimed to prove that it is actually a photon. These are things that claim to prove that light is a photon. Parametric down conversion is when a nonlinear crystal is used to split photon beams into pairs of photons that, in accordance with the law of conservation of energy and the law of conservation of momentum, have combined energies and momenta equal to the energy and momentum of the original photon and crystal lattice, and are phase matched in the frequency domain. It is claimed that the incoming photon interacts with the electric field within the crystal, which is assumed to be a coherent squeeze state of photons. A coherent squeeze state of photons. That's right. Much love. Going to have to listen to this one a couple times. Thank you for the super chat, man. Much love. I'll bring it all coherently, and I'm trying not to make it too much. All right, so again, it's claimed that the photon interacts with the electric field within the crystal, which is assumed to be a coherent squeeze state of photons. oh, light's not electric nor magnetic. It's not affected by electrics. It's interacting with the electric field. So again, you just presuppose and reify the photon and then claim that it's doing something it's not doing. That literally isn't proof of anything. One must reify and assume the photon to claim this somehow verifies the existence of a physical particle called the photon. The crystal alters the state of the disturbance that is light as it interacts with the electric field of the crystal. Reification fallacies prove nothing. Again, they claim they shoot light at a little crystal and it splits in one photon into two photons. All it does is manipulate the frequency and the resonance of the actual crystal and a manipulation of that electric field or the interaction of the light with the electric field. Basically, introduction of the dielectric disturbance with another additional medium, the crystal that is electric, gives you an outcome, a product of energy, and they claim based on atomistic reification and assumption that physical particle goes in there and splits up two ways. That's called pseudoscience. All right, they also claim that the photoelectric effect proves that light is a photon. Just a sec, let me get a drink. I hope this is making sense. The truth of the matter is that this is being buried and there will be no reviving of the pseudoscience. So let's see if we can get a substantive rebuttal instead of name calling. Fantastic presentation, Austin. Thank you, Glowbuster. Shout out to my boy Bob. Thank you for the super chat, brother. Much love. And I'll also check Cash App and PayPal before we get out of here. And I'll also look at Rockfin. But thank you. All right. Albert Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921 for his services to theoretical physics and especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. Since when were globers, or since when were flat earthers all about Einstein effects? Genetic fallacy. No. I'm about to destroy the claim of the photoelectric effect. I just think it's funny. Photoelectric effect is claimed to be a phenomenon in which electrically charged particles are released from or within a material when it absorbs electromagnetic radiation or light. The effect is often defined as the ejection of electrons from a metal plate when light falls on it. To try to put it simply, you could have a metal plate. You could take a balloon, rub it on your head, and put it on top of the metal plate. You're increasing the surface electrostatic charge of that plate. And once you shoot certain types of light at it, then it loses its charge. Okay, so let's talk about what they claim happens. The photoelectric effect is claimed to be a resonance phenomenon in which a photon is absorbed by the metal plate and an electron is ejected. This effect is invoked as if to prove that light consists of physical particles called photons. It's claimed that the photon collides with an atom and transfers its energy to an inner orbital electron, causing the ejection of the electron from the atom. They claim a little physical photon comes in, hits the atom, dislodges the orbital electron, and it flies off. That's literally what they claim. And people think this proves light's a photon. By reifying and assuming the particle physics theory in contention, I can prove it's actual. That's called a begging the question fallacy. It's claimed that each particle of light, the photon, collides with an electron and uses some of its energy to dislodge the electron. The rest of the photon's energy is then transferred to the free negative charge or the electron that was dislodged, and it's now called a photoelectron. Yikes. It goes Super Saiyan and transforms into a photoelectron. Yeah, you guys didn't know? It's Super Saiyan photoelectron. Did you not know that light's made of the little like Super Saiyan ha balls they have in Super Saiyan? That's all light is. They're little physical magic balls. It's just ridiculous to me. Sorry, but I digress. So anyway, they claim that this photon uses its energy and it gives some of its energy to the electron to dislodge it. And then the rest of its energy keeps going to the electron as it's free. And then the photon disappears, or more so morphs into a photoelectron. This is real. This is what they actually claim. But there's no interaction or any type of relationship between light and electrics at all, none whatsoever. But I claim that it can literally morph into an electron. And again, we already just completely dispelled the nonsense that is the pseudoscientific reification of the electron. And all these claims that are invoked to allegedly prove the photon require the assumption reification of the photon and the electron. What a joke. It's claimed that an electron has half the spin of a photon and that the electron is matter while the photon is energy. It is also claimed that energy and mass are interchangeable. Of course, spin does not refer to actual physical spin, rather orbital vibration. So effectively, the primary difference in the two is the rate of oscillation, as the claim of matter is entirely unverified. Again, they claim the electron is 100 million times smaller than the atom, but that it's matter. Okay, and then they classify things like, energy as it has spin or momentum. It's not actual spin. It's not actually like it's physically spinning. It's oscillation. That's called vibration. Okay. And again, they just assume that it's a little physical particle. And again, it's nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction. The point of this is that they are different modalities of the same thing. To invoke the technology utilizing this phenomenon as if to prove the claimed interpretation of the phenomena is akin to claiming cell phones prove gravity because they use accelerometers. I really want this point to soak in. People are running around talking about, again, not just saying, agree to disagree, I think atomic theory is real, I believe light is this. Going around saying you're an embarrassment to flat earth, you shouldn't be allowed to talk about it, ridiculing, berating, and insulting people, calling them stupid and morons, as they clearly don't know anything that's in this live stream. Like, only a couple of them kind of sort of think they do. And the truth is, they then invoke these things to claim it proves the photon and say, if you're going to deny the photon, you have to deny, and then they start talking about the technology. You have to deny the fact that we use semiconductors and all this stuff. Dude, it's just like when Globers say, stupid flurf, you don't believe in gravity, then you can't use your cell phone. It has an accelerometer in it. It's the same thing. Think about how, what a joke. The photoelectric effect is not observed with amorphous metals, whether amorphous semiconductors or conductors. This fact in and of itself refutes the photon. How many times has the debate been over? I've lost count. Uh-oh. The photoelectric effect, again, is claimed to prove the photon. Okay. The photoelectric effect is not observed with amorphous metals, whether amorphous semiconductors or conductors. This fact in and of itself refutes the photon. Good luck formulating a rebuttal to that one. I'm waiting. Within the quantum paradigm, it has been known since the 1960s that the photoelectric effect does not definitively imply the existence of photons. It is ambiguous whether it is the electronic levels or the impinging radiation that should be quantized. Of course, again, it is impossible to quantify the immaterial. To even get to this determination requires the presupposition that everything is comprised of tiny physical particles that can be quantified and requires the reification of the electron. Yikes. I'm going to read that again. Within the quantum paradigm, it has been known since the 1960s, this is within their own paradigm, that the photoelectric effect does not definitively imply the existence of photons. It is ambiguous whether it is the electronic levels or the impinging radiation that should be quantized. Of course, again, it is impossible to quantify the immaterial. To even get to this determination requires the presupposition that everything is comprised of tiny physical particles that can be quantified and requires the reification of the electron. It is claimed the photoelectric effect disproves the wave theory of light because the energy of a wave increases with an increase in intensity. So they claim that they discovered this photoelectric effect and it debunked the current wave theory of light and proved that light's a photon, and we still have flat earthers in 2022 running around claiming it proves the photon. Again, it's claimed the photoelectric effect disproves the wave theory of light because the energy of a wave increases with an increase in intensity. Yet in the photoelectric effect, increase in intensity has no effect on the energy of electrons emitted. A whole bunch of reification fallacies, as you can see, but however, the current on the photodetector is proportional to the intensity of light impinging on the cathode. Therefore, the relation between intensity and current naturally falls out. I want rebuttals. You guys have been going around bashing everyone. I want to hear your rebuttals. Give me substantive specificity and respond and rebut what is in the presentation, or stop ridiculing people and publicly walk it back. Yikes. It's obvious that your position is logically bankrupt and just literally flooded in materialistic presupposition. I'm going to read that bottom part again. However, the current on the photodetector is proportional to the intensity of light. impinging on the cathode. Therefore, the relation between intensity and current naturally falls out. So whenever you're like, oh man, this disproves the wave, it disproves the wave because the increase, the energy of a wave increases with the increase in intensity. But the photoelectric effect, the increased intensity doesn't have an effect on the energy. Therefore, we know it's not a wave. Are you serious? Like, you haven't even looked into it? Like, this is within the quantum mechanics paradigm. This is within the quantum mechanics paradigms. This is not me telling you how stupid your position is, which it is. This is the quantum mechanics paradigm. My goodness. The relation between intensity and current naturally falls out and cancels out. You wouldn't expect to see an effect. A standard reference for quantum optics sections 9.1 through 9.5 show that the electron field responds to a classical external electromagnetic radiation field by emitting electrons according to Poisson law probabilities. May have pronounced the dude's name wrong. Very much like that interpreted by Einstein in terms of light particles. Thus, the quantum detector produces discrete Poisson distributed clicks. Although the source is completely continuous and there are no photons at all in the quantum mechanical model. The state space of this quantum system consists of multi-electron states only. So here the multi-electron system followed by a macroscopic decoherence process that leads to the multiple dot localization of the emitted electron field is responsible for the creation of the dot pattern. This proves that the clicks cannot be taken to be a proof of the existence of photons. L. Mandel and E. Wolf, Optical Coherence and Quantum Optics, Cambridge University, 1995. Yikes. Oh, does this still prove the photon? I want rebuttals, bro. These points are included only to demonstrate that the claim that the photoelectric effect proves the photon is not even accurate within the presupposed model in contention. Yikes. Again, waves are not what something is, rather is what something does. So the reification of the wave and the proposed dichotomy of the photon versus wave theory of light is a false dichotomy anyway. This inclusion is just to elucidate this position's logically bankrupt nature. 3 different reasons within your own paradigm, and it doesn't happen with amorphous metals. I want rebuttals. Applying the framework of Æther, built upon the fatherheads of electrical field theory, which provided us with the electrical society we enjoy to this day. The electron is nothing more than the terminal end of one unit line of dielectric induction. Light is an ether perturbation or disturbance in the ether, which results in excitation or illumination. What is falsely characterized as a photon is nothing more than a dielectric pulse within the dielectric coaxial circuit of the ether perturbation. It's just movements and disturbances. If you can look up a coaxial cord or cable, it's just moving around in a disturbance. And then we isolate certain portions of this disturbance and people call it a physical particle called the photon. What a cool story, bro. Thus, the photon and the electron are different modalities of the same thing, specifically dielectricity. A physical particle called the photon does not dislodge a different physical particle called electrons from the metal plate after colliding with an atom. Rather, certain frequencies of the ether perturbation that is light alters the electric nature of the metal plate. The photon does not use some of its energy to dislodge an electron, give the rest of its energy to free electrons, and then disappear. They are different modalities of the same thing, the dielectric and electrostatics, not mystical particles. And what that people will try to do is they're going to take out what I say, what I explain it to be, right? They're gonna explain it what I explain it to be. They're gonna try to hyper focus on it. They're not gonna understand it. They're gonna call it word salad. They're gonna try to say stuff like, "Oh man, this doesn't make any sense. Look at how crazy what he's claiming is." I'm elucidating how crazy what you're claiming is. That's the point. You lost, because the point is that your whole talking point is that we're crazy for thinking that there's an ether and we're stupid morons and idiots and all this crazy stuff. And obviously this is just for anyone. This isn't just for like the little people that think that they control flat earth or whatever. This is for mainstream quantum proponents. This is for all you people that pretend you know that ether doesn't exist and all this crazy stuff. Dude, there's only one viable framework. It's that the ether exists. I did not just randomly come to this conclusion. It's the only logically viable option. Okay. To claim the photo, yeah, basically, I just looked up amorphous metals. Yeah, it's just like the quote unquote atomic structure. So like the actual like intrinsic makeup of it is more discombobulated, more like crystal like. And you don't get the photoelectric effect, whether it's a conductor or a semiconductor. That debunks the photon. It 100% debunks the claim that proves the photon. To claim the photoelectric effect proves the photon is a textbook reification fallacy. This postulation requires the reification of the atom, photon, and the electron. Simply, one must go into the observation presupposing all phenomena is comprised of these physical particles. This is nothing more than reifying the model in contention and begging the question. Double slit experiment. In the double slit experiment, a beam of light is aimed at a barrier with two vertical slits. After the light passes through the slits, the resulting pattern is recorded on a photographic plate. When one slit is covered, a single line of light is displayed, aligned with whichever slit is open. The infamous experiment that has confounded people. And by the way, when people are running around calling, so you bring up Mᴇᴏ, and they say, that's not science. You're not allowed to talk about that. That's not science. That's a parlor trick. That's not real science. Then they invoke. Okay, let's just really take this in. Let's really soak this in, okay? And you'll never get sufficient rebuttal to that. Like, it's not going to happen. It's crazy that we're in this paradigm. But anyway, so we bring up Mᴇᴏ. They say, where do you see interferometers in nature? That's not science. That's not an experiment. If you say Mᴇᴏ experiment, someone screams, doesn't let you finish this phrase and says, a what? What's an experiment? That's not an experiment. Okay, then you're not allowed to talk about it. They say, okay, you're not allowed to talk about it. Stop. Like, as if that's sufficient rebuttal to the actual observation. Like, the actual demonstration gives us an observation. What's actually observed doesn't have to be addressed at all or acknowledged. You can just scream that the word experiment doesn't mean scientific experiment. Therefore, you're not allowed to talk about it because it's not a scientific experiment. And it's just a parlor trick with light. And then you bring up a man-made photographic plate utilizing light and claim it proves definitively that light is a physical particle called the photon. And you bring up a photoelectric effect. Yikes. How's that not a parlor trick? How's one a parlor trick and one is not? It's so laughable. And again, you asked for it, man. You asked for it. This is why, again, when people can't actually debate you or your actual point, or they know that you can elucidate the hypocrisy within theirs, they funny mute you, insult you, strawman, and ad hom you. And I just had to put an end to the overall thing. And again, I know that people are like I'm being intense. It's just in general. This is just like people need to wake up from the deception that is literally the number one deception of all of them, which is materialism. They need to stop regurgitating what other people tell them to think. Whether you think there's a globe or flat or whatever, dude, you have to do your own research, diligent research, and understand things. Stop parroting scripts and parroting indoctrination and what you've been told. That's what got us in this trouble in the first place. It's just crazy. Its claim to photon is shot towards a film with two slits in front of a photographic plate. When both slits are open, interference pattern is detected. Waves that pass through two narrow parallel slits will form an interference pattern on a screen. This goes for all waves, whether light waves, water waves, or sound waves. Thus, the question arises, if light truly is comprised of tiny indivisible particles called photons, how could a single photon pass through both slits at the same time? So simply, again, waves are not things in and of themselves. They're just a type of movement. So it's not what something is, it's what something does. Like if you have a wave of water, it's not a wave, is not something you can grab out of the water. It's the water moving. That's all it is. Like if you shake a towel and it waves, you have to have the towel. The wave is just the medium moving. You have to have a medium to have wave-like propagation or movement. That's what it is. Now, what they try to say is that wave is just mathematical, that the wave is just mathematical. No, within your paradigm, your little photon that you're mathematically, it's just, you want to talk about just mathematical. It's crazy. Your little mathematical photon is moving transversely. Okay, so anyway, the point is, like, if you have a wave in ocean, right, and then you have two rocks, so you have two rocks representing the slits. Like if the water goes around, whatever breaks up the water, right? So like say that you have a rock and then the water goes and gets split up by the rock. The wave's going to go around the rock and then converge back on the other side of it. Okay. And so that's what happens in the double slit. They have two slits, right? So that lets that get through and then it converges back on the other side and gives you an interference pattern, just like a wave would on the little photographic sheet. Well, they claim that light's a photon. So how does the photon go through both slits at the same time? How does a single photon go through both slits at the same time? Okay, that's the first part of this experiment. If you've ever heard of it, double slit experiment, which is not an experiment in the scientific sense either. And so you're not allowed to talk about it because it has experiment in the title. But we're going to be adults and actually talk about the substantive, merit of the discussion. All right. It is of crucial importance to understand that waves are not things in and of themselves, rather the characteristic of something else. A wave is not what something is, it's what something does. A wave is a type of movement within a medium, such as a wave within water is in actuality just the movement of the water itself. It is the world of quantum mechanics, or in the world of quantum mechanics, waves are strictly mathematical descriptions of probability called a wave function. Although the wave function is merely a mathematical convention, the paradox still remains that the reified photon gives an interference pattern as if to imply the photon interfered with itself. And in any attempt to handwave dismiss the entirety of the phenomenon needing to be addressed here because you say it's just math is either being disingenuous or is incompetent. Once a detector is introduced to determine which of the slits the reified photon enters, the demonstration ceases to yield an interference pattern, whether placed in front of or behind the slits. Okay, so just so you guys know, this is claimed to be one of the most famous experiments ever that has confounded all physicists, right? They don't understand it. It's a crazy experiment. So they set up a film, like a little film. They cut slits in this little film of the sheet, okay? They shoot light at the sheets, and the sheet has two slits in it. And then they have a plate behind it that detects the sheets, and we'll get into that. I mean, it just uses electronics. Again, it's always using electronics, and then they basically revert, like they create an image. But anyway, so it creates an interference pattern as if it was like a wave, right? And so they're like, this is interesting. We thought it was a photon, and how could the photon do that? And they literally go as far as to claim that the single photon goes through both slits and comes back and collides with itself, interferes with itself, okay? Now, what gets so crazy about it is then they go put a detector in front of the slits and they want to see, well, which photon, like what's going on here? Like, is the photon, which slits it going through? What's going on, right? They want to figure it out. So they put the detector in front of it. And when they go to try to detect it, all of a sudden it doesn't have an interference pattern anymore. So they're like, okay, well, that's in front of it. So we'll put it behind it. It still doesn't have an interference pattern anymore. So they're like, what's going on? This is crazy. It's like the photon knows when we're trying to look at it, right? They act as if the photon is sentient and it knows you're trying to observe it. So then it stops doing the wave interference pattern. If you remove the detectors or you stop trying to actually see it as it happens, then it'll go back to having an interference pattern. So they're like, oh, this is so baffling. What's going on? All right. I think that explained that pretty simple enough. This has led to many seemingly outlandish speculations, such as the light somehow knows if it is being observed, effectively invoking the sentience of the photon. Yikes, bro. Yikes. But you can't talk about the ether, bro. You can't talk about the ether because you can't prove it scientifically with an independent variable. You can't prove it. But we're going to invoke the sentience of a photon. That doesn't exist. Okay. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment a variation of the double slit experiment, further added to the perplexing nature of these implications. A special type of crystal, a beta barium borate crystal, was added to each slit in order to split the photons into a pair of identical photons, with one of the photons directed to a detector while the other goes to the photographic sheet. Again, like we discussed earlier, with parametric down conversion, just claiming that the electric field of a crystal splits a physical photon into two that somehow all of a sudden have like the same energy they did before doesn't actually make the physical photon real, nor did you actually split a photon. They basically treat a photon like God, which is funny because who's the light bearer? And you think it's a coincidence that mainstream has done this, but I don't want to digress. Okay, so they claim that they put this crystal in front of the slits so that they can split the photons. Of course, they claim they can shoot a single photon also. Now, they don't actually know. When you really look into it, they don't actually know they're shooting a single photon. They think that they've created such a low probability of more than one photon getting through the slit that they can assume that one photon goes through. So by reifying and assuming the photon a million different times in a million different ways, they're going to somehow verify that it's a photon. And they claim that they shoot one photon because it's such a dim light that they're able to like then mess with it a little bit, and then like they're pretty sure that just one photon would get through the slit. They can never be completely sure, but they think they can just do one photon. This is really what they say. Never prove any of it. Never prove. This is so insane to me. It's so like illogical and remedial. It's just like textbook reification fallacies on an egregious level, right? They're just assuming it at every turn. And so they claim that they shoot this one photon, it hits these crystals, and then it shoots them into two different directions. And so what they're going to do is guide one of the photons to the plate, and they're going to guide one of the photons to a detector. Okay, that's what they use this crystal for. The results is that there is still no interference pattern. Even if the first photon hits the screen prior to the second one being detected. So they're like, oh, the photon knows if we're trying to detect it, so we'll trick the sentient photon into not knowing that we're going to try to detect it because we'll split it into two different photons, and one of them we won't detect and one of them we will detect, and we won't even know which one that we're going to detect. That way, there's no way the photon can know and try to avoid us figuring it out because we'll make sure we don't even know ourselves because the photon reads our mind. This is real, bro. This is real, bro. Okay, the result is that there is still no interference pattern, even if the first photon hits the screen prior to the second one being detected. Meaning, if the first photon goes and hits the screen and then the detector happens, right? Then there's still no interference pattern. This has been interpreted to mean that observing a photon changes events even if they have already happened. Yo. Bruh, I never really looked into the double slit, bro. I figured it out in 45 minutes. Like the second I fully knew every detail of what happened, I knew I had a logically viable explanation. This has confounded scientists for decades. You know why? Because every single one, regardless, they claim they're going to try to prove if it's a wave or a photon or what they're trying to do, a wave-particle duality. Every single person goes into it presupposing that light travels from point A to point B. So they assume that where it becomes manifest or illuminates, where you create a disturbance, that the light travels from there. And so they're all trying to explain it within that presupposed paradigm. And that's why they cannot, obviously. Anyway, so just to really drive this home, they claim that since you split it with the crystal and one goes to the detector, one goes to the sheet, this is a big deal. And by the way, all of quantum mechanics is dependent upon the way that they understand light and what they know about light. And they'll tell you that. Richard Feynman himself will tell you, for one, anyone that claims they know quantum mechanics or understands it doesn't understand quantum mechanics. And for two, everything that we think we know about quantum mechanics is based upon our current understanding of light and requires the accuracy of it. Okay? This whole entire field depends on this little experiment and things like this, which is not a scientific experiment, it's just a demonstration, but demonstrations can be valuable. They give us pieces of information. just like Michelson-Morley did. Okay. Anyway, they claim the photon sentient, knows if it's being observed, and that once you try to trick it, and then even you don't know if you're going to observe it or not, that even if the photon hits the plate to record the pattern and then gets detected, that it still won't do the pattern because it knows you're trying to detect it, even if you don't detect it before it hits the plate, as if it can transcend time or know you're going to observe it before you decide to observe it, or it actually goes back and changes events in the past. They actually think that this makes sense. This is modern times the smartest people in the world. What a joke, bro. Summary, scientists have gone as far as to effectively claim photons are sentient and can go back in time and alter events prior to re-examine their base presuppositions about the characteristics of light. Yikes, bro. Are you serious? Wait, which one's viable again? Who's crazy? How many times has this debate just been objectively over? Which one is crazy again? Who's an intellectual embarrassment at this point? It's clearly these people running around doing the double slit experiment, thinking that they somehow know what they're talking about. So either you claim that the photon is sentient and it knows it's being observed, and it's so sentient that it can know that you're going to try to observe it before you even know, or it actually goes back in time. It affects things that have already happened. Again, in summary, scientists have gone as far as to effectively claim photons are sentient and can go back in time to alter events prior to re-examining their base presuppositions about the characteristics of light, specifically that it is traveling from point A to point B. Yikes. The presupposition that light is comprised of physical particles called photons and that light travels from point A to point B is never even reconsidered. Unfounded claims. A single photon is shot. We discussed that. A photon is split. We discussed that. The photon interferes with itself. We discussed that. A single photon enters two different slits simultaneously. Good luck with that one. The photon is sentient, knowing if it is being observed. The photon can transcend time. The photon knows if it is going to be observed prior to being detected and can alter the outcome of something that has already happened. Wow, you want to talk about making unfounded claims? Wow, bro. All of these are built upon the reification of the physical particle called the photon and the base presupposition that light physically travels from point A to point B. You want to know what really happens, bro? The receiver itself is actually manipulating the intrinsic resonance of the background medium. Every time that you use a detector, you're like, oh, well, it hits the plate before the photon reaches the detector. Is the detector still there? Being used, ready to detect? Oh yeah. So it's behind it, it's in front of it. You split the quote unquote photon, you redirect the disturbance. That is the light. Yeah, you're actually affecting the background. The reason you can't explain it is because you don't understand. There's a background that is interconnected. It's all connected. And everything that you're doing within that electrically is affecting that background. And you're trying to look at and understand a disturbance within that background. So whenever you use any type of electric introduction to try to actually observe it within that medium, within that background medium, you are affecting its ability to basically remain coherent within its disturbance. Wow. So you're affecting the medium itself. You claim that you see little discrete chunks hit this plate and all this stuff. No, you don't. You don't see the photon. You make presuppositions. The light does not travel from point A to point B. It is already there. It's on the other side. And all you're doing is using a photographic plate, which uses, again, your reification of electrons. It's just electric manipulation. You have some type of impact with material using electric fields within the medium. And then you think that you know what's going on, but you don't know what's going on. You go as far as to basically claim the photon is a god. The light bearer. Yikes, bro. Okay. And then you say God is light. But you're effectively saying light is God, actually, right here is what you're saying. So who bears the light? Who holds the light? And that's why mainstream has fallen down to this nonsense and quantum's interchangeable with Kabbalah. But I'm not going to get too far into that. Anyway, I'm saying I think I pretty clearly just gave you a viable explanation that actually makes sense. You're manipulating you're manipulating disturbances within the medium. There's an entire background medium interconnected. Light itself is a disturbance within that medium. So when you use any type of electronic resonance, you're manipulating the resonance of that medium. So of course it's going to affect how you perceive the light, especially when the plate itself is using the electronic nature of where we live. Okay. Michelson-Morley. Globers will tell you that this had nothing to do with the spin of the earth and that this debunked the ether. What a joke. Again, this is the demonstration that we just now covered the double slit. We covered the photoelectric effect. We covered parametric down conversion, the three primary claims that supposedly prove a photon. And then the people that have been attacking, the proponents of ether, have been saying that Michelson-Morley is nothing more than a parlor trick, right? And then the Globers say, and the mainstream says, Wikipedia, all that, will tell you that it disproved the ether. But it did not, and that they had nothing to do with the motion of the earth whatsoever. They were just trying to prove the ether, and they disproved it. Okay, well, clearly and objectively, the title of the paper is On the Relative Motion of the Earth and the Luminiferous Ether. Okay, I'm going to cover this pretty quick. Actually, maybe not. I thought all the flat earthers knew about this, but they clearly don't. Michelson-Morley was a demonstration that utilized an interferometer to shoot two beams of light through a half-silvered mirror used to split the beam, attempting to detect the motion of the Earth spinning, the Earth moving through the ether. Hey guys, can anyone help me out here? Anyone help me out here? How is this a parlor trick, but what we just discussed with the double slit isn't a parlor trick? Yikes. Do you see how similar they are? They're claiming they're using crystals to split photons and all this stuff. Michelson-Morley was a demonstration that utilized an interferometer to shoot two beams of light through a half-silvered mirror used to split the beam, attempting to detect the motion of the Earth through the ether. Wow. Yeah, there is no rebuttal. The two beams of light were directed perpendicular to one another. One beam was shot in the same direction as the alleged orbital trajectory of the Earth, and the other against the presupposed motion of the Earth, which is supposedly orbiting around the sun. After leaving the splitter, the beams went to the ends of long arms and then were reflected back to the middle with mirrors. The beams then recombined on the other side of the splitter, creating a constructive and destructive interference pattern. If the Earth truly were orbiting within an ether, the light should show a transverse displacement relative to the motion of the Earth. So as they come back together, they should have a displacement because one of the light beams is going against the movement of the Earth. And of course, light, when we say going against and we say all these colloquial uses, it's nothing more than us quantifying the perception of the background disturbance. Light does not physically travel from point A to point B. It is literally just already there, and it's being illuminated. Based on how quickly we can see it illuminate, we can, in fact, use these disturbances, certainly when very coherent, to make precise measurements. That's what interferometry is. Anyway, okay. The Earth's alleged velocity is roughly 20 miles a second, and the device was sensitive enough to detect as little as 2 miles a second. However, the fringe shift detected was less than 1/6 the predicted value. It is falsely claimed that this disproved the ether, when in fact what it showed was either the Earth was stationary and the orbital motion. Okay, it is falsely claimed that this disproved the ether, when in fact what it showed was either the Earth was stationary and the orbital motion assumed was incorrect, or there was no stationary ether. Okay, again, they shot the light perpendicular. One's supposed to be going with and one's supposed to be going against the motion of the Earth. So it should have taken longer for the one going against the motion of the Earth around the sun to get to the receiver within an ether. So it either showed the Earth was stationary or that there was no stationary ether, assuming orbital motion. And it did detect something. Again, it was just 1/6 of the fringe shift predicted. This experiment has been done many times since with even more precise measurement capabilities and always yields the same results. In fact, the U.S. Air Force replicated Michelson-Morley in 1987 and also got the same results. Einstein then postulated his special theory of relativity to explain this result, and special relativity he stated, if the Michelson-Morley experiment had not brought us into serious embarrassment, no one would have regarded the relativity theory as a halfway redemption. These people that are, what's it, screen is hazy. The background pic is focused though. Oh, really? Is this better? I don't know what to tell you, man. All right, so maybe that's better if I'm closer. So these people that are hating on the Æther, which you're going to get no substantive specificity or any type of rebuttals to this presentation, obviously. What they're claiming that Einstein needed the Æther. See, the truth is what Michelson-Morley did was embarrass heliocentrism. And so just like he said, if the Michelson-Morley experiment had not brought us into serious embarrassment, no one would have regarded the relativity theory as halfway redemption. All right. Einstein then utilized the Lorentz contraction within his theory, effectively claiming that the measuring apparatus itself physically contracted during the experiment. He also claimed that time itself physically expanded or dilated, causing it to slow down, both due to the motion of the Earth. Yeah, he claimed the physical apparatus physically shrank and that time got bigger and actually slowed down because the Earth was moving. In other words, although it should have taken longer for the light going against the Earth to be received because it had to travel further, again, illumination, the quantification of illumination based on the disturbance of the background, the distance physically contracted and time slowed down as if to make it appear that the light beams were received together. Although the light did in fact show an interference pattern, or it did in fact show like a fringe shift, he simply dismissed this to instrument error. So it did show a displacement. It showed a shift, but just 1/6 the predicted value. And so he said, well, it shrank. The apparatus shrank, time got bigger and slowed down. So it looked, even though it should have taken longer and it should have had to go farther, it looked like it was the same because time physically expanded because, the Earth is moving. And this is what he proposed with special relativity to try to save heliocentrism in response to Michelson-Morley. He never offered a physical mechanism for the contraction whatsoever. And in fact, such a mechanism is still not agreed upon to this day, nor is exactly what it is or how to fully apply the math in certain situations. No one knows what the mechanism for contraction is to this day in their relativistic paradigm. Basically, he claimed that although the Earth orbits around the sun, the universe operates in such a way as if to trick us into thinking it was stationary by attributing physical properties to abstractions. And he had to just dismiss it to instrument error. Like I have said just a second ago, there are more precise measurements of exactly the same effect, exactly the same outcome. Even the Air Force themselves did it in 1987. Interferometry has only got even more advanced. And again, the actual thing itself was sensitive enough to detect 2 miles a second when they claim that the Earth is going 20 miles a second. It debunked that the Earth is moving. We may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical properties. This quote was used to explain how stupid the flat earthers are and how embarrassing they are, and how basically this is gravity 2.0 and that relativity needs it. And we're arguing for the vacuum of space and the paradigm of relativity. And this is the quote that was invoked to say that. Again, I just told you objectively what actually happened with Michelson-Morley. I just now read Einstein straight up saying that it embarrassed them. And he had to propose relativity, try to save the day and save the globe and save the heliocentric model. But anyway, we may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities in this sense. In what sense? Physical qualities. Okay. According to relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an Æther. According to the general theory of relativity, space without Æther is unthinkable, for in such space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility of existence for standards of space and time, that being measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. But this Æther may not be thought of as endowed with the quality of characteristic of ponderable media, as consisting of parts which may be tracked through time. The idea of motion may not be applied to it. Albert Einstein, Æther and the Theory of Relativity, 1920. This was obviously not understood by the people that invoked it and have run around talking about it, but this is what he's clearly saying. He had to do away with the current Æther that was the very framework for electrical field theory, and that is a substantive, although not in the material sense, just meaning like maybe viscosity. What you're going to try to strawman it all because we don't have any words to use that aren't defined materially, and that's very ignorant. It's a medium. It's the substrate that actually sustains the energy. This is not in any way what Albert Einstein offered or postulated. He had to replace that, because if that exists, then that means the earth isn't moving. And that's what Michelson-Morley showed us. So what he replaced it with was basically this realm of emptiness where there really is nothing there but space and time. But this space and time has physical properties, and it bends and warps, which is a reification fallacy, as those are clearly just clearly just conceptual abstractions. They cannot have physical properties. But the point is, he's saying that in this sense, there does exist an ether. Like, I still have to claim there's something outside of the material world, even though it's just the concepts of space and time, and somehow they physically bend and warp. And he said that you cannot apply motion to it, meaning that it cannot be in motion. Like, you cannot apply motion to it externally or additionally. And of course, the ether, you certainly can. In fact, that's what magnetism is, the loss of dielectricity in motion. So anyway, the point is, this just strengthens our point. This strengthens our point. And you don't understand it, right? So he's saying that in the sense of physical properties, that I have to invoke an ether-like characteristic only in this sense, that I had to attribute physical properties to conceptual abstractions, because there's no other way to even get motion or to invoke this change. Had to have something physical to it. So I just apply it to this thing that's conceptual. That way we can get the substrate part of it out of it. That way you wouldn't expect to see any type of friction or kickback or drag from the fact that the earth is revolving through space. It has to be nothingness, okay? But we can add concepts there that can't have motion applied to it. It's completely different things. This is him explaining how he had to replace the ether, just like he did earlier, saying Michelson-Morley embarrassed them. Okay, so objectively, Einstein did away with the ether that was the framework for electromagnetic field theory at the time. Electrical field theory had always assumed an ether as a background that sustains electromagnetic phenomena and energy. Yikes. This is Einstein acknowledging the need for physical properties within his theory, therefore acknowledging the need for this semblance of ether in this specific sense. However, Einstein's framework was the replacement of the current framework for electrical field theory known as the ether that was proposed to be the medium that sustained electromagnetic energy. The ether postulated up to that point did indeed have motion applied to it and was considered a medium. In summary, the ether model used as the framework for all successful progress in electrical field theory up to that point had to be done away with, as it showed that the earth was stationary. Of course, the theory of relativity is a reification fallacy that attempts to attribute physical properties to the two conceptual abstractions of space and of time. Michelson-Gell-Pearson. In the Michelson-Gell-Pearson experiment, of course, colloquial use as interferometry, it's not a natural scientific experiment, a very large ring interferometer over a mile in perimeter used to detect the relationship of sidereal rotation between the sky and the earth. Just like in Michelson-Morley, Michelson-Gell-Pearson experiment compared the light from a single source after traveling in two directions. The fringe shift observed matched the predicted value within 98% accuracy consistently. Specifically, the measured shift was 230 parts in 1,000, and the predicted shift was 237 parts in 1,000. And it does it every single time. It matches the predictions within 98% every single time, as an extremely consistent. The results of Michelson-Morley combined with Michelson-Gell show that the Earth is in fact stationary within an ether, and the sky rotates relative to the Earth in a rest frame of reference. So the Earth is the rest frame of reference, and the sky moves relative to that, and there is an ether. And in fact, Michelson-Morley shows us that this ether slightly drifts. It slightly drifts, and of course it does, because it's moving, and there's a movement of the sky. There's an ether vortex, and there is a slight drift. Okay, so these combined, what's all these people on FED got to say about this? They won't even talk about it. They don't even understand it. They'll just say it's not science, and they'll talk about the double slit experiment. But the point of the matter is, and the Globers can't answer this either, why does it show the sidereal rotation within 98% accuracy using interferometry and an ether framework, right? Because that's what that would be. But then it doesn't show the supposed orbital motion of the Earth in Michelson-Morley, but it does, in fact, show that there is some type of movement within the ether. What this does is prove the ether. Ironically, it literally proves the ether and proves that the earth is stationary. Now, you can claim it doesn't prove the ether because it's immaterial, so whatever. There's no other logically viable alternative or explanation to the phenomena observed. Clip it out. See if you can rebut. I want rebuttals. All these people talking so crazy, bro. I want rebuttals. I want public apologies to everyone that you ridiculed. This is the same effect observed with the Sagnac effect. Sagnac, after discovering the effect, stated that it was due to a vortex in the ether. This is the pivotal moment that the ether was abandoned due to a philosophical devotion to the Copernican principle and the heliocentric model. This is the reason for the current state of modern physics, drowning in illogical concept reifications and paradoxes. The special theory of relativity was, of course, the foundation for the general theory of relativity, which is the currently accepted explanation for quote-unquote gravity. Simply summarized, the ether cannot be accepted as a framework of interpretation as it dictates the acknowledgement that the earth is at rest. This philosophical devotion, combined with an inept attempt to quantify the immaterial, birthed quantum mechanics. I'm going to repeat that. Simply summarized, the ether cannot be accepted as a framework of interpretation as it dictates the acknowledgement that the earth is at rest. This philosophical devotion, combined with an inept attempt to quantify the immaterial, birthed quantum mechanics, which was proposed originally in like the 20s, right after this. Light. We have two different options again that sit in front of us. That is atomism, and that is the ether. Atomism, or quantum, says that the quantum theory of light was proposed by Einstein and states that light travels in bundles of energy. Each bundle is known as a photon, which has wave-like properties. It can also be described as a discrete chunk of energy or information. The wave is a mathematical function used to describe the motion of this physical particle called the photon, which travels from one location to the next. Ether. Light is an ether perturbation or disturbance within the ether or background medium. Light does not travel from point A to point B. Rather, the speed of light is the rate of induction into the ether. Light is not a wave, nor is it a particle. We simply quantify the rate of perception or excitation of the background. The manifested illumination is not synonymous with what light itself is. Magnetism. Obviously, only one of these are viable. The left's not. We've thoroughly debunked it. Atomism and quantum. This is how they define magnetism. Now, what they will say when you ask them what magnetism is and ask them to explain this and actually have to try to have an open-minded, fair intellectual exchange, they will say, I didn't make claims about magnetism. I didn't make claims about electrostatics. I didn't make claims about electricity. I didn't make claims about magnetic fields. We're talking about the ether. Is the ether magnetism? We're not talking about that because they can't answer the question and they can't address the implications of it. So they're being disingenuous and dishonest, and that's not my problem. Magnetism is the exchange of virtual photons. This is the quantum explanation. Electrons emit undetectable virtual particles that instruct objects to move away or come closer. Virtual photons are constantly being emitted and reabsorbed by the electron. That's what quantum says that magnetism is. Here's what ether says. Magnetism is dielectric dissipation, or the loss of inertia, or dielectric itself. It is the second half of the conjugate field of dielectric and the magnetic, like if you have a donut in the interior of it, the hyperboloid and the toroid. It's the conjugate field of the dielectric and the magnetic. Magnetism is energy manifested, and the ether is energy in potential. The magnetic field is the conjugate relationship between centrifugal divergence and centripetal convergence. It's very easy with the visualization, you have the energy going this way, and then you have the energy going this way. And in fact, the magnetic field is nothing more than dielectric field, but specifically loss of dielectricity. I get that some people are like, oh, this is crazy, I don't understand it, or this is magic, or woo-woo, whatever. They try to say that this is crazy and magic, right? But what they say is virtual photons, right? They claim virtual photons. The exchange of virtual photons are constantly being emitted and reabsorbed by the electron. Yikes, bro. Which again is another, we've buried the electron. Now, this is not intuitive to you, maybe because you've been brainwashed, but really think about it. Okay, it's just the same thing. Dielectricity and magnetism is the same thing. Basically, the movement of the ether is what we perceive to be magnetism. The loss of dielectricity manifests as the magnetic field, which is a force. Okay. So anyway, again, magnetism is dielectric dissipation. Okay, electrostatics, according to atomism and quantum. Electrostatics is also the exchange of virtual photons. Virtual photons are the exchange particle for electromagnetic interaction. Two charged particles can exchange virtual photons of arbitrarily small momentum and energy imbalance, giving rise to electrostatics. Yikes. But they want to say, they don't want to make claims about magnetism or electrostatics. They want to critique your claim about the ether. You know why? Because their quantum mechanics, pseudoscientific world of fairy tales that attempt to quantify the immaterial cannot explain this. They can't explain it. And they claim that both magnetism and electrostatics is the exchange of virtual photons. This is not Austin's definition. I'll read it again. Electrostatics is also the exchange of virtual photons. Virtual photons are the exchange particle for electromagnetic interaction. Two charged particles can exchange virtual photons of arbitrarily small momentum and energy imbalance, giving rise to electrostatics. And they claim again, magnetism and electrostatics are both virtual photons. Magnetism and dielectricity, or electrostatics, are just different modalities of the same thing. It is a dielectric phenomena discharging or grounding into counterspace, or the ether realm. Electrostatics are dielectric fields, and the gaps in the field are falsely characterized as electrons. Look how funny that is. They can't define it. They don't know what magnetism is or what comprises magnetism. They call it a field, but they say fields are just mathematical. They can't tell you what the field's comprised of, but they know it has to be particles because everything has to be particles. So they call it virtual particles and virtual photons, and they say electrostatics and magnetism are both the exchange of virtual photons. Well, isn't that funny? Because what it actually is electrostatics and magnetism are the same thing, but different modalities of the same thing. Again, magnetism and dielectricity or electrostatics are just different modalities of the same thing. It is a dielectric phenomena discharging or grounding into counterspace or the etheric realm. Electrostatics are dielectric fields, and the gaps in the field are falsely characterized as electrons. Oh, which one's more logically viable again? Wow. All molecular and intermolecular attractive forces are electrostatic in nature, even within the atomistic paradigm, meaning within the atomistic paradigm, the quantum mechanics paradigm, there's an intrinsic electrostatic force that holds all matter together, and they think it's the exchange of virtual photons. Yo. They're not even on first base, bro. The audacity of people to freaking berate people is a joke. All right, let's see what Richard Feynman has to say, who is, one of the most propped up people everywhere, anywhere. This is a mega overkill to the light bright presentation I saw the other day. A virtual particle is an abstraction which facilitates in calculations and understanding. The term is very vague and loosely defined. They never appear as inputs or outputs of experiments. Their existence is questionable at best. However, they are very useful in rendering concepts and making equations balance out. Richard Feynman. Yikes. So do you want to know why they won't answer what is magnetism? And they'll just scream at you and say, are we talking about magnetism or are we talking about the ether? I just explained to you guys that, first of all, the etheric realm is counterspace, right? It's counterspace to the etheric realm, and you got the dielectricity. You want to put it in super crude terms, you can look at it like dielectricity is the ether at rest and magnetism is the ether in motion. Right. And so electrostatics and magnetism are just two different versions of the same thing. And in fact, the loss of dielectricity manifests as the magnetic field. Magnetism is the dielectric field. They're two versions of the same thing, and they all come from a background medium. And it's all about the relationship with the material world inside that background medium. And that is the only feasible or viable explanation at all whatsoever. And it actually has been utilized to accurately develop electrical field theory and everything that we have to this day. And those very things that we now know have been hijacked, redefined, quantified, but not actually defined. Anyway, again, they will never, the people that are calling you stupid for talking about the ether, right? And a bunch of people want to say, well, I don't know, I'm on the fence, blah, blah, blah. The truth is, if you actually look into it, you understand it's not either you just saying, I have no idea what's going on in the world at all, or ether's the only viable framework. You actually have to research it. You'll find out there's a reason why we talk about this. It's not because we just love to make baseless assertions and speculations. We know there's only one viable explanation. Again, if you ask them to define electrostatics or magnetism, they say they're both the exchange of virtual photons, and none of these flat earthers that are ridiculing you or rebuking you will ever actually tell you that answer, or will actually answer what magnetism is. They'll say it's the movement of electric charge, and they say it's a field, and you ask what a field is, they don't know. You ask them what the field of particles is, what's the particles, they don't know. And the truth is, quantum claims it's virtual photons, which I'm going to read it one more time. Richard Feynman, because we had some appeal to authorities going on to define the word medium as if it has to be matter. Here's an atheistic, materialistic person telling you that medium has to be fit within the materialistic assumption that he lives within. Therefore, you can't use the word medium. Haha, ether disproven. Anyway, Richard Feynman says a virtual particle is an abstraction which facilitates in calculations and understandings. The term is very vague and loosely defined. They never appear as inputs or outputs of experiments. Their existence is questionable at best. However, they are very useful in rendering concepts and making equations balance out. Quantum defines a field as simply a mathematical convention. It does not truly define what a field is in any way. Virtual photons obviously do not actually exist and are merely a mathematical convention to balance equation discrepancies within the assumed particle nature of all phenomena. So it's not as simple as they can't explain it. Nature itself, what is manifest and does exist, because according to you guys, if it's not manifest, it doesn't exist. So what is magnetism before it becomes magnetism? Anyway, right? It literally, the phenomena can't be worked out within the paradigm of quantum mechanics and physical particles, assuming everything's comprised of little physical particles. So they have to make a new one up called virtual photons to even make the math work out. And you're like, oh, well, that's just math. Why would you ever even utter that? Quantum mechanics itself, by definition, is nothing but math. Everything is described as a wave function probability. It's all math. Quantum in its very inception is math. Quanta, the smallest piece of something that you can count. Quantum, and all the way in German, look at the etymology, it is to count. The fact that you then try to pretend that you can say, oh, well, I don't take part in that part of it because it's just math. That's what quantum mechanics is by definition. Virtual photons have never and will never be experimentally validated, as they are merely conceptual abstractions. In fact, virtual photons could not even exist in theory, as their existence would violate the conservation of energy and momentum. Debate over again. The academic devotion to materialism and the need to quantify all things, which of course the immaterial cannot be quantified intrinsically, has resulted in a paradigm where quantum mechanics cannot even define what magnetism or what a magnetic field is comprised of. Ether offers a viable explanation as to the phenomena of magnetism. Magnetism and the dielectric are two sides to the same coin and are simply different modalities of the ether. It's just like water, steam, and ice are the same thing but different versions of. The loss or dissipation of dielectricity manifests as magnetism, and the two share an intrinsic conjugate geometric relationship. Critics will happily and boldly ridicule ether proponents, but they will never even attempt to properly define magnetism, a field, or energy. Only one of the frameworks possesses any semblance of viability. Concept reification and appeals to incredulity render the quantum position utterly useless and nonsensical. More specifically, logically bankrupt. You ask them to define a field, they'll say math, which is a description, not what it is. They can't define what a field is. Ask them to define magnetism. They can't tell you what magnetism is, but they try to describe it with math using virtual photons and virtual particles. And then you ask them to define energy, and they will say the ability or capacity to do work, which is what something does, not what something is. If I ask you what a human is and you tell me, oh, humans breathe oxygen, I'd be like, you're a moron. You have to define what it is, not what it does. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for all that you share, bro. Do you have a TikTok? Kind of lame, but there's a big FE base there. Watching your debates and tour videos have helped me immensely when talking to people about it. Thank you for the $10 super chat, and I am going to get on TikTok soon. I think I do have one Witz that gets it on TikTok. I've just never posted anything. The presentation's almost over, by the way. I know this was like overkill, but it had to be done. Okay. Æther rebranded. Ironically, there are many terms and theories that have been created within quantum mechanics that indirectly acknowledge an ether. In fact, quantum mechanics contains quite a few undefined placeholders due to the framework's fundamental lack of viability. However, the ether cannot be directly acknowledged for obvious reasons. Here are some examples: quantum fluid, quantum foam, quantum condensation, string net condensation, quantum vacuum, 0-point energy, quantum vacuum energy, virtual particles, virtual photons, quantum field theory, quantum fluctuations, Heisenberg uncertainties principle, basically telling you that this could be the case. In conclusion, the viability of these two frameworks of interpretation can be summarized in a handful of simple questions. Is electromagnetic phenomena sustained within a medium, or can it be sustained with no medium? What exists outside of the material world? Something or nothing? Can nothingness exist? I was told that something or nothing is a false dichotomy. It obviously is not. What exists outside of the material world? Something or nothing? You have to define the word something, because thing means something that's material. That's called semantics. Is there something outside of the material world? Yes or no? Something or nothing? You can literally destroy anyone making fun of you for talking about the ether with these questions right here. And if they're talking about this scientific dogmatic script, they will literally not ever answer them. And they will actually probably just ridicule you, insult you, and just try to divert or strawman the question. Or they'll even claim stuff like false dichotomy. By the way, if something or nothing is a false dichotomy, what's the third viable option? Nice. What are virtual particles? Are they real? If they pop into existence, where do they come from? If something is not materially manifest, does this equate to non-existence? If something is not materially manifest, does that equate to non-existence? Obviously not. All these questions obviously are automatic wins. I could have literally just done this for one slide and won the debate. I'm just making a point. What is magnetism? What is electrostatics? What is light? What is a magnetic field? All of these destroy the argument. What is a field? What is energy? Again, they can't define these things, and they'll run away and they'll say that they're not making claims and all this crazy nonsense. You are making claims. You're claiming atomism or claiming quantum mechanics, because as soon as you bash the ether, you claim that intrinsically. You don't want to absorb the implications of your claim, which is intellectually disingenuous, useless, and dishonest. Okay, they don't describe fields as anything other than mathematical conventions to explain motion. You ask them what is energy, they say the ability or capacity to do work. What type of energy is light? Oh, light's not electric nor magnetic. It's just always found within electrics and magnetic. It's electromagnetic radiation, but it's not really, or it kind of is, or it's not electric nor magnetic. It's electromagnetic. And all your little semantical word games. What type of energy is light? Is your little photon? Those questions literally debunk the entire paradigm. If light is a photon, can it be instant? Okay. If everything is comprised of discrete particles, can there exist instantaneous action at a distance? Can a physical particle be in multiple places simultaneously? If energy cannot be created nor destroyed, then it can only be transformed or transferred. Then where does it come from? Yikes. Where does metaphysical phenomena reside? Is there a metaphysical realm? Are you going to deny intuition? You're going to deny consciousness? That has been the presentation on the ether. Hope that you enjoyed it. Know that it was a lot. Sorry I had to go twice. I am not going to lie. I'm pretty tired after all of that. But and we have to get up super early. So thank you guys for kicking it. Hopefully that that made sense to you guys and you guys enjoyed it. I would say hopefully that we'll get some type of substantive rebuttal, but obviously we're not going to. Yeah, of course they didn't let me present my argument, bro. Anyway, thank you guys for kicking it. I tried to make it not too Too personal. Can we get a standing ovation? Great presentation, brother. Mad props. Thank you, man. And what I found out when I was putting this together is like, you saw how much that was. There's all kinds of stuff we can go in depth and talk about, and people need to learn about, and that I still would like to investigate, right? And I just couldn't. There's no way I could put it in there. I'd be here talking all day. So I think we should like look into this. I'll integrate it into one of the new shows that I'm doing, kind of like understanding some of this stuff more and more. Like I said, I'm going to have multiple shows, so it'll be fun. We're going to have a lot of content coming for you, a little debate show and some other types of shows. Not like a debate show all day, every day, real monotonous and toxic or anything like that. There will be nothing like that on my channel. But we should have a lot of good content coming. I'll have OBS. It'll be a whole new looking stream. I'll have this better mic actually set up. So yeah, hopefully you guys kind of like the setup. We do got the ability to like really rock out with the computer now. Thank you guys for that. And I'll be emailing you guys thank yous and doing the little stream to chat with you guys. Bro, watch out. There's a bunch of light particles behind me in my background. I didn't even think about that. Sorry, I had to watch out. All right, I'm really tired. I love you guys. Thank you guys for all the super chats. Setup looks sick, bro. Thank you, man. I'll kind of let you guys on a little bit of updates before I get out of here. Because I had to get up super early and I have to drive like freaking 8 hours tomorrow to get to Tennessee by a certain time, and then we have a baby shower. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna crash. How is being observed which slit the photon passes through the double slit current? They use a little photographic plate. They never observe which one it goes through. They make up everything that they talk about. I don't want to start answering questions, although I would, but I'm just tired. Great stream. Thanks for the rewind for this one too. Thanks. No problem. Well done. Thanks. So a baby shower. Yeah, my family wanted to have like a little get together for us having a baby and give us like a couple things, I guess. So yeah, we're in the new house. As you can see, this will be the stream room, and I'm going to try to really hook it up and hook everything up. I, like maxed out some credit cards and took out like money, like loan, and went in debt to get all this stuff to set up the stream. I don't even have it all set up. Like I have different stuff that I'll be integrating to the stream that I haven't got to really fully set up, but it should be really cool. I think it's worth it. I'm going to kind of try to maybe do this full time. We'll see how it goes. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, then I will be putting it on the back burner in that sense. But I feel led to do it. I think it'll be cool, and we'll get everything rocked out where everything will be looking real nice. You can see in my eyes I'm tired, bro. So yeah, it should be cool. And yeah, I just kind of went all in a way, and you guys will get to see all the outcome of it. It'll get dope. And yeah, I have faith that we'll make it work. We'll make it happen. I'll be able to pay back a bunch of this stuff sooner than later, hopefully, and keep my head above water. And if I can, that'll be cool. Thank you guys for kicking it. Like I said, I'm just really tired, so I'm going to crash. Thanks for any and all donations. I will be gone for the weekend, and then we'll come back next week. I think we come back like Tuesday, and then I'll come back. I'll get like the OBS and everything set up. And so like sometime next week, we'll start where I should be streaming about 5 days a week, at least, maybe 6. So I'll be streaming every day pretty much and doing all kinds of different shows with set times and days and having guests on. It should be really cool. So there you go. I did a 2-hour stream and you're still here. Yeah. And I'm tired, bro. You're having a boy. It's a girl. It is a girl. All right. Like I said, thank you guys for kicking it. To wrap up the whole point, if someone watches this, stop claiming that if something isn't manifested, doesn't exist, when you're making supernatural claims yourself, or you're making like philosophical, unfounded claims yourself. Atomic theory has been thoroughly refuted if you actually pay attention to the presentation. If you're going to actually start going around and continuously attacking people, then I want you to know that where I go from here will be based on you. I think I kept it pretty chill overall regarding the specifics or any type of getting muddy with it or getting messy with it. And let's just say I will win that. And I'm not just doing this for me or anything. You're just attacking a lot of people that are my friends, and you're shutting good conversation down, and you're making us become stagnant intellectually. And no one signed up to Flat Earth to have someone else dictate their thoughts with dogma as of a cult. And of course, you can't explain any type of precession with the gyro. You can't explain any type of movement with the pendulum. You cannot explain the actual mechanism of any type of movement with the sky. You can't detect any type of weight distribution. You can't explain the analemma. You can't explain the Tropic of Cancer or Tropic of Capricorn. All of a sudden, when we have an ether framework, we begin to be able to explain things, including the phenomena of magnetism, which is the one true force in the world. And we've been lied to about where we live, and we've been lied to about what energy is. And there's not even a proper definition of it. And that's because you have been controlled, and so has the curriculum that you've been brainwashed with. They don't want you to know what energy is, and that's why there isn't even a definition of it. And they just say the ability or capacity to do work, which is what something does, not what something is, because they don't want you to know. But the truth is that pure potential, unmanifest energy is in counter space, which is what the ether is, if you want to know what the ether is. And you won't rebut it, and word salad isn't a rebuttal. And the truth is magnetism is that becoming manifest as you have a loss of dielectricity, and that the electron is nothing more than a terminal end of dielectricity, more specifically dielectric ends of lines of induction within a field of dielectricity. And once we begin to understand these things, we can actually manipulate them and start to actually make our world a better place. This was the big lie, and that's why you will obviously never get me to stop talking about it, and I don't think you're going to get anyone else to after they start to hear how incredibly wrong that side of the argument is. Agree to disagree, walk it back and be nice to people and stop trying to control what people say, or it's just going to get worse for you. And I would suggest that you really, really listen to what I'm saying. I'm telling you, you are going to stop bashing people even on your show. That's right. I'm big broing you. It's over because I don't care about this like infighting, quote unquote, or divide or whatever. I look at it like elevation, right? And ether is the only viable framework to explain phenomena, and it was discarded to make you stupid and ignorant, and discarded because of relativity and heliocentrism. And they have now told you to count everything that is invisible, little physical particles, and believe everything is within the material world and that you can make it all up. And then now you're going around being within a scientific dogma script, while simultaneously you are reifying conceptual abstractions as if they are real. And that is the problem. All right. Thank you guys for kicking it again. Hopefully that'll kind of summarize the whole point. And again, just the whole point of the matter is, if you say, oh, it's not science, you can't prove it, just philosophy, actually you're adhering to atomism, atomic theory. It's not scientific theory, it's theory. Just because we can isolate phenomena does not mean your interpretation is true. There is something immaterial there, but you attempt to count it. Are you actually describing what it is and what is there accurately? No. And that's why we have all kinds of paradoxes, which then quantum mechanics that cannot be worked out, because they're attempting to quantify the immaterial. There you go. Let's pick a viable framework and move on and move up and elevate, or you'll get left behind. All right. Thank you guys again for hanging out. I know it's been a long time since I've been on YouTube. We got a lot of content coming. I'm super tired. I'll try to drop. What I'll do is I'll figure out once it uploads, I'll figure out what time I restart the presentation. I'll drop that in the presentation, in the description. So if you ever want to see it again or send it to someone and tell them to listen to it, you can just tell them to start there if they want to save some time. That'll be cool. And then I'll also drop the link to the presentation. I did see a couple mistakes in it, some typos and stuff, so I'll fix it. I think maybe I'll probably need to do that at some point tonight or tomorrow, but maybe I'll email it to myself on my MacBook and I can do it on the road. And then I'll drop the actual presentation in the description so you guys can have it. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out. And like I said, well done, man. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thanks for kicking it. Vader Bear, Cammy, Zach, Bob. Shout out to all the legends that are here. And yeah, any donations sent via Cash App or PayPal, I will read them off. And thank you in advance. And thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for everybody hanging out at Rockfin. And thank you for the super chats at Rockfin, which I see. I don't even know how to read them. I read the first one off. I might have got a text, huh? Thank you, PSYOP within a PSYOP, for the $5 tip on Rockfin. All right. Yeah, and if you want to support the channel, $WITSIT on Cash App, or WITSIT at protonmail.com on PayPal, or you can also go to paypal.me/innerworld. You can also sign up as a patron at patreon.com/WITSIT, which I will be revamping the entire Patreon and adding some perks and stuff. And then I will be setting some stuff up for the people that rallied around me to help me get the computer. All right. Thank you guys for kicking it. Seek and speak truth unequivocally. The weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. So don't care what other people think. Don't care what weak people or smart people don't care what ignorant people think. Strong people don't care what weak people think. In fact, when they revile you for his name's name's sake, rejoice, for they did it to all the prophets before you. So it's actually just kind of a confirmation you're doing what's right. Whenever people that are ignorant of a subject begin to attack you, it's because they're self-projecting, typically motivated out of pride and ego, and that's all good. Just continue to speak the truth. If you're wrong about something, man up, say you were wrong, admit that maybe you were inaccurate in the way that you went about it, and that's okay. That's what makes life great, is that you continue to grow and learn new things. But if you allow your pride to get to you, then you will never learn and you will never grow. All right. Thank you guys for kicking it again. I'm going to catch up with you guys on the flip side, like a coin toss. Peace.
That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers acting say they high, say they sipping pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up, had to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in the field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Took the way you saw the world, then distorted it. Now you think you wanna rock that twirl somewhere orbiting. Theories disproportionate, the truth distorted quick with a forceful grip. They force them as simple that we absorbing quick. Took the people's signature, the mean extorted it. They forging it, if news anchors informants who informing them. There's a surplus, but they tell us there are shortages. Credit economy mortgages, dollar that's supported with empty fortresses. But what's important is this: we porting ships, important gifts, of course it is. What extortion is in accordance with an assortment list of foreign tricks we ignoring, which informing this, informing this. It looked like we were snoring tricked. Pedophilia and the government endorsing it. Yeah, eugenics is exactly what abortion is. You just vilify those insubordinate. Way to matrix engineer, that's unfortunate. Geopolitically, we in a field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers acting say they high, say they sip with pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up just to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in a field. That's for Israel. Wonder, is it real?